really started with sort of running away from a nightmare, which is I don't want to die. I need to change. That actually excelled me to the next level, like realizing that my body is a temple and that like the one that's actually investing and trading is, I'm in that.
Yeah.
That's the car I drive to work every day.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm fine tuned and I have, better diet and I have better sleep and better exercise and I'm having all this joy in my life and I can actually bring in my creativity and I can quiet down these survival needs to access my intuition and my imagination and novel thinking, then I can actually be a better performer.
Welcome back to the Medicin podcast. My name is Mimi, and I have my glorious partner in life and love with me here.
What is going on, everybody? We are back on the Medicin podcast. This is Chase. We got our dear friend, one of my favorite conversations of all time on the Medicin podcast, famous recurring guest now, Jason Pickard. Welcome back to the show, my friend.
Thank you so much. It's so nice to be with both of you.
Yeah.
It's really cool to see a couple doing work together and having fun doing it. So you guys are both real big inspirations to me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I received that. It is so fun. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Our listeners know I'm kind of a broken record at this point, but just how grateful I am for this medium that we call work. That's, actually it's very much a labor of love, and the gift it is to be able to sit down with people like you and people like Paul and other guests that we have. And if we didn't have this medium that is the podcast, one, we wouldn't be able to gift our listeners, wisdom and experience and everything. But also, like, for us, it's such a gift for us to be able to learn from people like you, whether it's over Zoom or in person. Obviously, we love in person because it's just, you just feel into the person. But it's such an immense gift for us, and we don't take it lightly. And I want to keep reiterating that over and over, how much we appreciate your time and your willingness to share and to go deep. And we were just saying before we pushed record, like, all right, time doesn't exist now. Let's go, let's go into the portal, the vortex.
I imagine it's different. People say, "Oh, don't take your work home with you," but I imagine for some people working together, if your work is challenging, it must be difficult at home. But if you're doing what you love to do and you're inspired by your work, I guess you must be excited to take your homework.
I think that's something that I'm still sort of evolving into, which is it never felt completely right for me to have this separation between work and personal life. It never felt authentic to me because I give so much of my life to my work that for me to keep them separate turned into this very like transactional relationship that I had with my occupation or my livelihood. And although it is challenging to integrate life and work and not let the stresses of work and or life spill into the other lane, I am finding so much more fulfillment, so much more, satiation through this integration of the two, that the work that I put out into the world that, hopefully trickles back into some level of abundance.
Keyword,
but is also life and my personal passions.
Yeah. I think that's the whole mantra of, are we living to work or are we working to live?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you're saying is you're working to live.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. For sure.
Well, let's jump in. The first question, which we've asked you before because you've been on, I'll definitely link that first episode with you in the show notes. So if you want to hear, deep into Jason's personal story, we'll get into some of it today, but definitely check that episode out later on. Maybe listen to this one first. But the first question that we ask every guest on the Medicin is, what do you love in your life? What aspect of your life do you love so much that you wish you could gift it to every human?
Yeah. What a great question. Yeah. I don't remember what I said the first time, but I think you really kind of teed it up with this working to live. I mean, I think for me, what the reason why I created my course, the Abundance Archetype, which I'm sure we'll get into, is to kind of break this myth that wealth and well-being have to be separate, or that we can't love what we do and have a meaningful life at the same time. So for me, it was really about teaching people that you can make money, you can generate wealth, you can do it in a meaningful way that's purpose-driven, that's meaningful for your life and meaningful for those around you and for the world at large. And at the same time, not sacrifice your own well-being while doing it, or your health.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and you're no stranger to that. Maybe, some of our listeners will know your story, but maybe if we could get into just a little bit of your background and what you, what experience do you have with that lack of vitality and health, that now you're so passionate about teaching others how to generate both at the same time?
Yeah. Well, for me, when I was a kid, I started out with asking a lot of questions that had no answers. I mean, I could literally remember just sitting up at night in my bed and thinking, what is death?
Yeah. Oh man.
What is space?
Same.
Yeah.
I was just like, does it ever end? How could it end?
I wasn't thinking of those questions. I don't think.
I still do. I'm 32 years old. I'm still asking them.
I was wrapped up in these existential questions that I just could not answer. And eventually I kind of just got off them, and I went on to this whole idea of just trying to be successful and making money and doing well in school. And I kind of followed through that whole plan until I got out into Wall Street, and I actually actualized that, and I was really successful. I was 25, 26 years old. I was making tons of money. I was working for one of the biggest hedge funds in the world. But at the same time, I was sick, and I was nearly dying. I mean, I was 330 pounds. I was obviously obese. I was getting all sorts of health problems. I was having these issues that were getting me to the hospital. And so I knew I needed to make a change. And at that time, I set out on this quest of personal development, and I traveled all around the world from Paul Chek to yoga instructors to martial arts people to studying psychology and depth psychology and shamanism to really try to find out these answers, and ultimately integrated them into my Wall Street life. Kind of where I'm at now is I want to be able to help people with those same questions that I had. I went through, a great education. I was at the University of Virginia. I was out on Wall Street. I was doing all these things, but I didn't even know how to manage myself. I didn't know how to eat right for my body type. I didn't know how to sleep. I didn't know anything about movement. I didn't know how to have play or happiness in my life. I knew nothing about managing relationships. So this whole idea that these two things were separate, I was into full on to this Wall Street world without any of this sort of esoteric, psychological, holistic self-knowledge. Then when I retired from Wall Street in 2019, I said, I'm not this Wall Street guy anymore. I don't even want to think about that, right? This whole primary personality, I pushed it away. I said, that's not me. And I went completely into the self-development world, only to realize that my gift to the world, my reason for being here, is to teach people how to integrate both of them. And so now that's what I did. I created this Abundance Archetype to teach people how to have wealth, how to generate wealth, how to be successful. Everything I learned from the titans of Wall Street, from sitting with some of the greatest minds and all these success secrets that I learned and I cultivated. But then the same thing with all the personal development, and then integrating them and offering them in this course. So
I love that. And your story is so powerful, and it's definitely worth the listen to go back to that episode and hear, the nitty gritty details of that, because it's mind blowing for sure. But I'm curious about, if we can rewind just a minute, you feel unhealthy. You maybe know that you're in an unhealthy place. Do you remember was there a moment or an event or an impetus where something clicked in you, where you were like, I have to change something?
Oh yeah, I was like near death. I was 26 years old. I was at the top of my game. I was literally being recognized as one of the top traders in the world. But I found myself with this leg infection. I had this purple leg. There was like this leg infection creeping up my leg, going to my groin, running to the hospital, getting pumped up with antibiotics. And I'm sitting there, my parents and my brother, they didn't live in New York. I didn't really have any love in my life at that time. I was sitting there essentially alone in the hospital, and I'm like, crap, this is not what I thought about. This is not what I thought life was going to be. Like, what's the point of all this if I'm not going to be around in 10 years to enjoy this? What's the point of working so hard if I don't have a family to share it with?
Yeah.
And so that was, it really started with sort of running away from a nightmare, which is, I don't want to die. That was really the magic, is that actually excelled me to the next level, like realizing that my body is a temple, and that like the one that's actually investing and trading is I'm in that.
Yeah.
That's the car I drive to work every day.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm fine tuned and I have, better diet and I have better sleep and better exercise and I'm having all this joy in my life and I can actually bring in my creativity and I can quiet down these survival needs to access my intuition and my imagination and novel thinking, then I can actually be a better performer. Quiet down these survival needs to access my intuition and my imagination and novel thinking, then I can actually be a better performer.
Yeah. And I think this is one of the things that actually makes your story quite unique, where many who hit this breaking point and they leave the context of their illness, and a lot of times it's these, high achieving professions in many cases, and you step out and you find, some level of spiritual enlightenment, and then you might even like crawl up into the cave and become a hermit and sit.
I tried to do that.
But like, what makes it so powerful is this integration. I mean, like the Lion King story, where Simba leaves after this sort of traumatic version of himself and finds Timon and Pumbaa and grasps the concept of
he becomes
Hakuna
a hippie.
Matata. Right. It's like Hakuna Matata, baby. They're like, no worries, no issues. But there comes this moment where you're presented the opportunity for integration and to come back and deliver the elixir of life if you're looking at the hero's journey.
Yeah.
You go through the dark night of the soul, you pass through the mentor, and you're sitting in this space of having tasted the elixir of life. But there's this almost like this layer of responsibility of taking the next step, to step back into the world that you sort of broke through, to deliver this elixir of life to others, to integrate it to yourself, and be able to show up as that version amongst the context of chaos and dis-ease, if you will.
Yeah.
What was that like for you to go back into the world and bring this newfound idea of abundance into the working world?
Well, in a lot of ways, I'll kind of answer two parts of that, but in a lot of ways, I feel like that's what I'm doing now. I feel like the whole hero's journey was me leaving Wall Street to really explore the unknown. I remember when I was telling my boss, Paul Tudor-Jones, who's one of the greatest investors of all time, and just a really incredible dude and somebody I looked up to a lot. I told him I'm leaving Wall Street and I'm going to explore, personal development. And he quoted, I think it's like a Roosevelt or a quote about the man in the arena. Life is about, even if you fail, it's about going and trying something new and stepping out and going over your comfort zones. And that's what real satisfaction comes in life. Even if you fail, the one who's like had the blood, sweat, and tears and actually dared to be great, that even if you failed, like, that's a meaningful life versus the one who never tries anything new. So for me, it really was stepping out of Wall Street into the unknown, and it really was quite unknown. And there was a lot of like dark moments, what's my life all about? All of a sudden, I'm just driving my kids back and forth to school. I'm like, am I going to be like a taxi driver? Like what am I doing? Because it's really, I don't know if anyone's ever left. I know you guys have. You've left financial world and things like that, but you're this really important person on paper, right? It's like having a lot of money in a company that you don't actually have in your bank account, and then it could just go away like in a second, right? So you're this really important person on paper. Everyone's emailing you and everyone's calling you, and they want to take you out to dinner, and you have meetings and all these things, and all of a sudden you retire and it's like fade to black. There's nothing. You're just gone to them. There's no reaching out. You basically hear from nobody.
Yeah.
And you experienced that?
Yeah, that's what I experienced. And there's this like kind of dark night of the soul where you have to really like dig deep and say, what am I really here for? So, you go through this whole, and nobody really talks about that because there's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of emotions around that where you're thinking, oh man, what did I do? I just left this incredible job.
God, that's my biggest fear in a lot of ways still.
I was making all this money, and then there's like disbelief, and then there's shock, and then there's regret, anger, worry,
confusion.
Yeah.
And then you realize that it's actually more like a spiral, because I realized that actually the skill sets that I had in trading, the things that I really loved about them, let's just say like pattern recognition. Pattern recognition is a big thing in trading, obviously. You have to recognize the patterns of the charts and what's going to come next. I realized like that skill that I had that I loved was what made me a good therapist, because now I could find these patterns in my clients.
Yeah.
The whole idea of, future prediction. that's the same skill set, working with your intuition that comes in the personal development. Having the rhythm of the markets and pacing the markets was the same thing of like having rhythm with my clients and what's going on in their life and actually helping them create rhythm and ritual. So what I found is like, what's that? There's actually a layer behind the job. And interestingly enough, that got back to the things that I loved to do as a kid. So when I was a kid, I loved to, and I still do, I love drums. I'm a big drummer. So the first thing, like nobody in my family was drumming or playing music, but I had a drum in my hand very, very early on. And so when I'm in trading, it's like, how do I find the rhythm of the markets and tapping into the rhythm of the markets? And now in my Abundance Archetype course, it's teaching people not only to have a rhythm with the markets or to be in rhythm with the markets, but also to be in the rhythm of nature and to have rhythm through rituals, right? So what I found was I wasn't really leaving anything. I was taking those skills with me and now just spiraling them up into kind of a new expression of them.
Yeah. Wow.
That's so good. And I want to go back to something that you were talking about when you were kind of in these different stages, almost like the stages of grief, when someone...
It's just like that.
When someone close to us...
It's really like the death of a personality.
That's what I was going to ask is it sounds like you're just almost describing the stages of grief that we all have to go through when someone close to us dies. And in this case, that someone close was part of your identity, right?
Yeah.
And we've all experienced that. I was a dental hygienist, left dental hygiene, Big Four finance, left that. And so to some degree, obviously I wasn't at the degree of, way up here on the Wall Street trading and everything, but like it is a part of your identity. And there is this question of like, who am I now? What do I even like if I'm not doing this thing every day? And so I'm sure there's someone listening right now who's going through that, like currently right this moment. And one thing that we've heard you talk about mostly in your content, and some of the things that you offer is the connection between death and abundance. Mm-hmm. Can you link those two in this conversation of kind of these stages of grief? What is that? What's the link between death and abundance?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. But before I say that, I was just thinking about your dental hygienist position. Mm-hmm. I bet if you really dig into what was the thing that you really loved about it, whether or not it was like helping people, working with people, making people healthier, right? Mm-hmm. Cleaning them up. Mm-hmm. It's essentially the same thing you're doing now with your your mushy products and your podcasts and all that.
It was the education. It was the guide archetype.
Yeah.
I enjoyed cleaning people's teeth. It's really nice to see the before and after and really be in that work and know that you're helping someone that way. But my favorite part of the job was hearing someone say, oh my gosh, I've never thought about it that way. Yeah. No one's ever explained it to me that way. Now they have a new thing to grab onto for their ownership of their dental health, which is connected to the rest of their health.
Yeah.
So that was the part that I really, really loved.
Yeah, and that's what you're doing now.
Yeah.
So, I think the problem is that we identify with the personality or the identity versus the process that's moving through us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But back to death. So a little bit, in my course, I talk about this. So Carlos Castaneda, who's the author of the books about Don Juan. Don Juan was this Yaqui Indian shaman. He says that use death as your spiritual advisor.
Mm. Yeah, that's really powerful. Yeah. Let's unpack that.
So it's really cool, actually. He says that, he quotes Don Juan as saying that death sits behind you on your left side, behind your left shoulder. And whenever you're not unsure about something in your life, take a moment, turn to your death, and ask your death what you should do. So one question you can ask yourself is, if I only had 1 week to live, how would I be spending that time? If I was imagine yourself on your deathbed right now. Would you be doing what you're doing now? Would you have regrets about...
Currently, in this moment, yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's how death creates life. So, I mean, there's research. There's research that I quote by Kenneth Vail, who talks about that people who actually think about their death actually can live healthier lives. It gives you better perspectives. It helps you put your priorities in place. It can be healing in a lot of ways. I mean, there's this whole idea is like, think about what would you do knowing that an 18-wheeler can take you out in any moment?
Which is true for all of us.
Like for some, it could give you a sense of maybe anxiety, but the reality is that, you know, when you really think about death, it makes you focus on life because you don't take any moment for granted.
Right.
You really think about, I'm not going to be in this meaningless job. I'm not going to be in this meaningless relationship.
Yeah.
And when you actually confront death, you realize that, hey, I need to take care of my body.
Yeah.
I need to take care of my health. So actually, like, it's this really marginalized thing in our culture. We don't ever want to think about it. You know, we never want to talk about it. We don't want to think about those kinds of things. Death in general, it's like this big, like, black cloud. But it's inevitable for all of us.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that you can actually work with it is learn to die to little things. Each day, at the end of the day, reflect on what's something that happened today that I can die a little bit to today.
What would be an example that you can think of?
Oh, just like letting go of an argument, letting go of something that, you know, pissed you off, or you know, a belief system or a bad habit. You know, it's just like it's just having little mini deaths each day that can be helpful.
You know, something that's coming up for me in this framework of abundance and money. And thinking about your death, this practice of thinking about your death and living for the moment is this practice of getting in touch with the present moment. And so much of money and money advice is like, save for the future and like worry about the future so you save now. And it's this idea that in order to be wealthy, there's a level of saving for the future and the various mechanisms of retirement and planning, money planning, family planning. I'm not saying any of those things are bad, but what I'm thinking is that that's not the most present that you can be. And is that kind of different from an abundance mindset?
Well, it's actually kind of, there's a lot of interesting points to it. So on one hand, there's so many people that say, oh, well, you know, I hate my job, but if I work here till I'm 60, I'll have this pension and then I'll live this like picket fence life.
Yeah.
Well, like, there's no guarantee in that.
Right.
What, you're going to give up the next 30 years just so you can have this idea of this pension that may be there and then like live like some undetermined number of years after that. You know, so it's like, I think that's a ridiculous concept. And so I think it's really important to do what you love now. You know, I think you have to live like each moment's your last, but there's a little bit of a paradox in there. Because one of the big problems we have in our culture is that we only believe in one lifetime. And that causes a lot of problems because we're like, we just got to take everything we want now. We'll just get it all now. Let's just take from the earth. Let's extract everything. Let's dig, because who cares? There's no tomorrow. So I think it's a little bit of a paradox you got to hold. You have to live like you have unlimited lifetimes, and at the same time, like you don't know if this is your last moment. And in that way, you really take advantage of it now, but you have to live in a mindset like, what's my 7 generational return? What is this impact? What is this decision I'm going to do now? How's this going to impact the next 7 generations? Not only is that important for my kids and their kids and so forth and the future of our planet, but because I need a place to come back to.
Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like the way that I'm thinking about it and kind of how I've thought about it in the past, but maybe not in these words exactly, is almost like, yes, this is the life I'm living, but this life spills over into the next. So I want the foundation of whatever I'm building in this life to kind of be with me in the next, whatever that looks like. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but somehow what I learn and experience and navigate and grow through, hopefully, is going to serve me in the next, whatever that looks like. That's and who knows? I can't prove that. I don't have evidence, but that's currently what resonates most with me.
Well, and even in I'm gonna butcher this. It's a Bible verse, which is like, sorry everybody, you know I'm usually not the Bible verse quoting, but it's like, do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven. for where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And I think the concept of heaven in Christianity is typically like, oh, you'll have the pearly gates and the clouds in the sky and store up your treasures up there so that when you die you can live like a king. But I think there's likely a deeper meaning and a deeper message that can be looked for here, which is like this idea of presence and living in this moment isn't to consume these things of life that are fleeting, but rather to build something here that you can experience now, but is still everlasting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. When you were talking before, I had something, but I forgot what you were going to.
I was talking about how it spills over.
So, I mean, science tells us that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? We know that there's a cause and effect in the material world. Mm-hmm. But why would that stop there?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, everything that we do, it's like we either get these good karma points or these bad karma points. And it's not a punishment. It's not a punishment, but could you create a better system to make people accountable? How else would you, if you were God, how would you create a system or universe that would actually make people accountable for their actions so that we can actually learn?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's not a punishment. It's a learning system, right? So if you do something that isn't positive for the earth, well, that's a negative, reaction to you so that you can learn and then you have an opportunity to come back and do it again. And we're all on this journey of learning and growth. And that's why we're here. It's a university.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're in Earth School. We're here to learn and grow. And so these causes and effects, the decisions that we make and the actions that we make that are in our control, they have to have some sort of feedback loop, or there would be no growth.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good.
Well, I was going to say, we've been teasing this, the abundance archetype, and this hero's journey and the elixir of life that you've identified in your story and are now bringing back and integrating into the world. So I'm thinking we can start jumping into this a little bit and unpacking the abundance archetype course, but really the key concepts behind this. And I'd love to start with just the words themselves, abundance and archetype. I think that if you're familiar with personal development and spiritual development in any way, you've probably seen a 20-year-old saying, here's the 5 steps to abundance on Instagram. Click link below, right? But I think there's depth and meaning to these words that many of us have not looked into, and I know you have in this process. So maybe we can start by unpacking abundance and archetype.
Yeah, so, one of the things that we were talking about earlier is that, I recommend everybody, when they want to understand a word deeper, use an etymological dictionary. Etymological dictionaries take you down to the roots of words. So abundance comes from unda, U-N-D-A, unda. It's literally unto us, right? And so unda in Sanskrit are these water spirits, or these water, they call them devas, but these water beings, like the intelligence, the personified laws of nature in water. And we are water beings, right? So this abundance is literally living inside of us as water. So the first thing about abundance is that, like, we're looking outwards for abundance. We are looking at all these objects, but the reality is that there's a reversal where the subject becomes the search. You are the abundance. And so it's about turning within. And, the idea about abundance is not actually like happiness. Happiness comes from happenstance, which means to be lucky, right? The idea is, like, the peak of abundance is that no matter what life throws at you, you stay balanced through the ups and the downs. It's not necessarily about having everything work out for you. It's not necessarily about having tons of money. It's that no matter what life throws at you, you are here. You are shanti, as they say, or, balanced or equipoise. And that you know who you truly are. And that no matter what happens to you, or no matter who comes into your life, you never get knocked off that. No matter what happens, the only thing you can really control is your attitude towards life, or your mood, or your vibe, your frequency. And once you lock into who you truly are, what's authentic to you, where you come from as a spiritual being here, a divine being having a human experience, your deepest core values, you're in touch with your heart, what's important to you, and that is abundance. One of the really kind of far out examples that I give is Viktor Frankl in his book A Man's Search for Meaning talks about seeing Jews being walked or thrown into the gas chambers in the Holocaust, singing and dancing their way into their own demise. And like that really shocked me to the core. But when I thought about that, I was like, wow, that is abundance. That is abundance. Like, it's not the expression that we would want of abundance, but hey, we're in a circumstance that we can't control, right? We're literally being murdered, but we're going to not let them affect our spirit. They can take our body. They can't kill our spirit, right? No matter what you do, I'm going to sing for life. I'm going to stick to my mood. You can't take my vibe away, like that's abundance. They really, that is a symbol, very symbolic of abundance to me.
Do you think that one has to experience a level of pressure or intensity in life in order to truly put that to the test? And maybe for a little more context, as we sit in a world of convenience, but have all of these challenges, there are many who identify as a victim, but do they really have enough pressure to choose abundance? And so I'm curious, do you need a certain level of intensity in order to look at yourself in the mirror and choose abundance considering the circumstances?
I never really thought about that, but in the moment, I'm thinking about crystals and diamonds. Diamonds have to go under incredible heat and pressure in order to become these beautiful, multifaceted diamonds. So, if we're using that as a metaphor for life, I would imagine that that's at least somewhat true. I think if we all look back at our life, we realize that the places that we really grew were not necessarily all the happy times,
right,
but were really the tough times, right? So, this invocation of the pain teacher, or this invocation of life's lessons, if we turn, one of the lessons in my course is turning losses into learning. And so when you reframe these difficult parts in life as that there are actually opportunities for us to grow and learn and become more of who we meant to be and get away these kind of false wrappings, then yeah, I think in a lot of ways you're right.
I think this is great. And I love this so much. I'm just soaking it up. But something I think about often, and I'm sure others do as well, is this balance of of going through difficult times. Maybe you have some awareness of, hey, I am a divine being. I'm a spiritual being. These negative circumstances can come at me in life, but they can't hurt who I really am. Like you can intellectually feel that, know that, and align with it. But bad things happen, and there is this balance, and sometimes a tendency when this is strong in your life to kind of spiritually bypass difficulty and really, for lack of a better word, shit days when you're just having a really tough time, or you are feeling the negativity or maybe anxiety, in the external world. How do you not spiritually bypass if you are feeling some type of way that's maybe not so great, but still like hang on to who you truly are, but still recognize that there's some shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple things there. I think one of the formulas that actually helps me is Shinzen Young, I think he's a Buddhist teacher. He talks about that suffering equals pain times resistance. So, the pain is inevitable.
Yeah.
The pains of life are going to come up, but how much we resist to them is up to us. And that the multiplication of those two things equals how much we suffer in life. So I think it's actually just being present with what's coming up and not resisting and realizing that this is part of a larger process. It's kind of oriented to there's something for me to learn here. There's something that I actually invoked here because of, the concepts that we talked about cause and effect. Like somehow this is being delivered to me. This is somehow part of either something that happened to me in the past or something that I need to learn for the future, some kind of reconciliation of something. My teacher, Jeffrey Armstrong, teaches that the planets, governing the astrology, he calls them UPS, Universal Parcel System. It's like they're literally delivering us these pieces of things in our life. And the idea is to learn to flow with them. It's this concept of not clinging or not clasping or detachment. It's kind of going with the flow and just being present with what's happening and not resisting too much. But this whole idea of remembering who we really are, what we're saying is like, we're the ones that are the drivers of the car we're in. It's not identifying as much with the body or the physical pains of the body or what's happening in the material world. It's having that constant reorientation to realizing that the one that is here that's witnessing this is something that's not made out of parts. It's an indivisible individual, and that's immortal.
Yeah.
But that takes a constant practice.
Yeah. That's
over and over and over again. It's like coming back to the breath. It's remembering each moment, who I really am.
Yeah.
I am not this body. I am not my circumstances.
Yeah.
I'm not my bank account. I am not how many likes I have on
Instagram. No, that's
I don't
really
have too
good.
many because I'm new.
Yeah.
But it's like,
just wait till that number starts getting huge.
Come on, baby. So it really is a constant practice. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. But it's just constantly turning around and looking inside and remembering who you truly are.
Yeah.
And that who you truly are is not what's actually happening to you.
Yeah.
And when you can come from that perspective, it helps resist less.
Yeah.
And when you resist less, the pain doesn't equal as much suffering.
Yeah, it's really encouraging to hear even someone like you that's like, yeah, it's a practice. You have to keep reminding yourself, because I think sometimes I can get a little frustrated with myself if I am feeling negativity and I need to keep reminding myself of who I really am and what I'm here to experience. And this is all for ultimately light and love and good and my own growth. And I sometimes get frustrated at myself that I need to keep reminding myself. It's like, damn it, haven't you gotten it yet? And so it's a balance of, I think, compassion as well for the part of you that slips back into the 3D like suckiness, and just like almost like a parent that's like, I'm parenting myself, like my higher self is almost parenting the physical form, the body, where it's like, or the monkey mind, maybe it is, where it's like, no, it's okay. You got this. Like, I'll keep teaching you as long as it takes for you to really, get the lesson. Or, little kids tying their shoes, you're not going to get angry if they don't get it on the third time. Right. So, I'm just talking myself through this a little bit.
Everybody's, experienced let's just say it's a hike and you've got a little kid with you.
Yeah.
The little kid will, depending on, where you're at in the terrain, be happy, giddy, or miserable.
Yeah.
And they're so attached to the circumstances of the hike. And that's the child. If we can be the parent or the adult that can realize it's about the journey.
Yeah.
And this is the importance of having a vision and a dream and a purpose. I know that I'm going to get to the top. I have my sight on the top still. I realize that this is a beautiful mountain that I'm hiking that will have a fluctuating terrain of misery as well as beauty, and keeping that perspective, not to, oh shit, now I'm in a foot of mud. I must be worthless. This must be worthless. Let's throw this completely away. No, it's just it's a moment in time on this trail towards the top.
I'm just laughing because I'm thinking about taking my own kids hiking, and I'm usually having a good time until they start complaining.
Yeah.
Then I'm carrying them, and then I'm not having a good time because I'm carrying 50 pounds up the hill. Spiritual bypassing, though, that's a really big topic.
It's real.
I think this whole concept of, it's all one man. It's all good. It's just all one, or it's all none. It's all nothing. The reality is yes, it's true. It is all nothing and it is all one, but there's also an individual.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there wasn't an individual, who's the one that's actually having this conversation?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
If it was all one without any individual, then there's no one here to actually talk about it. If it was all nothing, well, what is that all about? All nothing. So I think actually taking responsibility, and you really have to own up to everything that's in your life right now happened because there's something that it was meaningful for you. Either it was something from the past that, I know that could be tough to hear, but the reality is that, karma is very complex. And so when you sort of begin to take the vantage point that everything in my life is happening to me because, something I did, something somebody else did, or something that needs to reconcile, the reality is that we can't control any of that. There's so many things that are out of our control. All we can control is our response to it and our mood and our attitude.
Yeah.
So every single day waking up and remembering who you truly are, that despite what happens to you, you're not going to get knocked off your bike. That's the key.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have and I've been guilty of this many times, but a culture that is in the phase of identifying all of the things that have happened to us that essentially justify why things aren't going the way that we would like, but are sitting in that awareness. And I think this is kind of like talk therapy a lot of times exposes these things from your childhood or these traumas that you've experienced, but doesn't push you past the point of identifying them into taking responsibility for how you played a part and taking a responsibility for how you're going to now get out of this or catalyze these moments for your own growth. I think many of us are sitting in this place where we're actually a little more aware of how things are traumatic to us, maybe more than ever, at least in my lifetime. Kids and people are picking up on these traumas in their teens and 20s, and they're like, this is what happened to me, and this is why it's manifesting in a particular way. What happens if we start to take some level of responsibility, and especially responsibility for using those traumas or those challenges into something that can catalyze your life?
Yeah, that's the wounded healer, right? I mean, we've all been through things, and you know, there's no way to say that any of that should happen to anybody, right? But the reality is that some of the most wounded people turn out to be the most influential people in the world. So I think there's an opportunity to switch from this happened to me to this happened for me in some way, and trying to find the nugget of gold in it, even in the worst of circumstances.
Yeah.
How are you teaching your kids differently about abundance than how you were taught about abundance?
Yeah. Well, you know, when you're teaching with kids, there's the only real thing you can do is model it yourself. You know, they're like sponges. They're literally recording everything you're saying. So if you were talking about this is what abundance looks like, but then you're living like, you know, you're eating donuts and you're not exercising and you're miserable and you're going to a job you hate, then that's what they're going to do, right? So you can talk all you want, you can teach all you want with words, but ultimately it's all going to be about what you actually represent to them and show them in their life. So, you know, me leaving Wall Street and following what I love to do and living the kind of life I live and moving us out into nature and living in nature and going on hikes and eating organic food, just really like the lifestyle, and showing them like the vibrancy that I have, and singing and dancing and playing and doing art and doing music and having good relationships. That's abundance, you know? So it doesn't really, you know, my kids are like 2, 7, and 9, you know, you don't really need to teach them too much. It's more important just to show them, you know, live it yourself, embody abundance in all areas of your life. And that's going to be the best teacher for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good.
A lot of things too with kids is like, I realize that they have so much more wisdom than we think. Like what if they were these like really advanced? So like, what if we're the iPhone 12 and they're the iPhone 14 or something? Like they're coming in with like, you know, we've all had these experiences of seeing like 2-year-olds already like working an iPhone or something like that. I'm like, how do you even do that? And like a 70-year-old person who doesn't even know how to turn it on. Right. So yeah, what if they're actually more, you know, what if not all of us have had the same number of lives? What if like our biological age doesn't actually equate to the amount of life experience or wisdom that we have, or even multiple lifetime experience? So, you know, actually turning around and recognizing that, okay, you're here to teach them, of course, but like in a way, like act like the bumper bowling.
Sure.
Right? Like you're the bumper, you know, they're a unique individual. Like God, really, you know, that's one of the problems we have, I think, in our education system. Was like I was talking to a friend of mine who was a construction guy, one of my best friends who built my house. We went to high school together, and I said, Justin, I said, do you find it interesting that we have completely different skill sets, but we had the exact same education? Nobody said to us, okay, well, this guy's really good at his hands, you know, with his hands, and this guy's really good with numbers or really good with creativity or music or something. Let's cultivate that, you know, let's bring that out. No, you guys you each have to take Spanish, you each have to take this, you know, and so forth. And so it's really looking at each one of the kids as a unique soul that's here with a lot of wisdom and a lot of past life experience. And a lot of this you can gain from obviously watching them and listening to them and paying attention to what do they love to do and where's their energy going. But even Vedic astrology offers a lot of insights to like looking at the big picture of like a multiple lifetime view to really understand the soul that's incarnating into your family and what might even be your karmic connection with the soul and how can you best guide them. And then, you know, actually listening to them a little bit. Like I could have this idea that, okay, you have to have, you know, we're all polar types, right? You have to have 2/3 of fats and proteins and 1/3 carbohydrates. And then my kid comes to me and says, Dad, I don't want to eat meat. And I'm like, okay, I could either be like, you have to eat your meat. You have to eat, you know, pasture chicken. You have to eat grass-fed beef. Or I could say, wow, maybe there's some wisdom in that. Maybe this is like a past yogi living in my family who's like repulsed by the thought of having meat. It's like totally against everything he or she believes in. And like, so I've learned to kind of go with the flow with that too. So then you say, okay, don't eat meat, try it out and listen to your body, pay attention. That's the best education you can have anyway. Okay. So, you know, we eat like completely organic, you know, we're living like mostly off grid where we are. It's like biodynamic farms galore and all this. And then my kids go to like a birthday party and then there's like a pizza and a cake sitting around. And, you know, it's, you know, I think that there's ways to make all of that food, all of the foods, you know, people think that like eating healthy can't be fun or enjoyable.
Like you can never have a pizza or a burger.
We eat the most incredible burgers. We eat the most incredible pizza. We make the most incredible cakes. We have so much fun with it. And it's like so good for you. You know, I always laugh when my kids are like, we're eating cake. I'm like, oh, you're eating like, you know, biodynamic butter and like grass-fed cow and grass-fed milk and, you know, sprouted nuts. Like, cool. You know, it's like more nutrition than almost anybody on the planet's meal. And they think they're like indulging in something.
Totally.
But that's the whole thing. But so you go and there's like this occasional piece of pizza, and I've learned to say, just try, you want to have it, try it out. And then they try it out, and then we get in the car after and I say, how do you feel? They're like, oh, I feel like crap. I'm like, well, now you know. There's your education.
Yeah.
Now you can make these decisions for yourself.
Yeah, totally. I think that's really good.
No, it's like you can have amazing sex with your wife. You don't have to go to like the strip club or like find a prostitute. It's going to make you feel like shit. You can try it. It's going to make you feel like shit. But you can still have wholesome, amazing sex with your wife, you know? Like I think we feel the same way. You can educate with food and sex in the same lane a lot of times.
Yeah.
Well, I think that was just because we're recording at Paul Chek's house for the listeners. I don't know if anyone knows that. But yeah, we're here at Paul's house. And one of the things that, you know, he taught me when I first met him a long time ago, like 12, 13 years ago, was being healthy is fun. Yeah. It's as simple as that. When I first came out here, it was like 2008 or 2009. I was completely burnt out, and I thought being healthy was like, you know, lean turkey breast and broccoli. And just like the gym had to be like incredibly painful and had to be like twice a day, and you had to be like so rigid and tight. Then I come out here and I meet Paul, and we're making like popcorn, and we're watching a movie, and we're smoking tobacco, and we're dancing and singing and playing and making art and stacking rocks. I'm like, wow, like actually being healthy is like way more exciting and fun than it is to be unhealthy. And I think that's a really big conspiracy out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that we felt that in our life as well.
Yeah. We say it all the time. We said it like last week where we were having burgers and it was all grass-fed, you know, regenerative farmed. And then the next night we made pizzas from scratch, and it was like all, you know, organic everything. And it was like, I love that we get to have burgers and pizza, and we, you know, air fry our own potatoes and stuff. And it's like, you don't feel like you're missing out. Like you just have to be a little more tuned in and aware. But then you only have to learn that stuff once and make one different decision to like, okay, I'm going to order my meat from this meat subscription box that's regenerative farmed and organic and local and all that. You only have to make that decision once. You don't have to keep deciding. You know, I think once you know better, then you can do better. But once you step into that, it's like, I'm not missing out on anything.
Oh,
you know?
Yeah. I mean, I would go as far as saying like you're actually going way beyond the other experience. But this is one of the things I talk about in my course. I take all of the investment principles. I looked at all the things. This is a little bit different than the 8 keys to mastery that we'll get into. But I looked at what were the principles that made me a good trader? Right? And I said, what if I actually swapped out the investment and made the investment myself? And interestingly, the same rules applied. So like, how do we look at risk reward in trading? right? What's the upside to a trade and what's the potential risk? And how do we look at the risk reward to all the activities in our life? What's the risk reward in our diet? Okay, so we don't eat an organic thing. Maybe it costs a little bit less, right? So maybe there's a little bit of a reward there, or maybe it's like easy to get or more accessible or quicker, like to use the microwave a little. So like, what's the risk to that, right? And what's the risk reward to eating organic food? Well, maybe it costs a little bit more. Maybe it takes a little bit more time to make it, but there's a huge reward. What are the risks of eating this food and then having to, have supplements and vitamins and medications and doctor's pills and surgeries and missed days at work and lower performance? There's a huge intersectionality of how all these things combine together. So I'm looking at things, when I was in trading, we want to look for what they call asymmetric risk rewards. Look for 3-to-1 upsides to what you can lose, right? You want to be able to make 3 times what you can lose and do that over and over again. In that way, it's kind of interesting. This is just a little bit of a trading thing, but I know you dig this.
Yeah.
But, in professional baseball, you can be in the Hall of Fame with like a 300 or 350 at the best batting average, which means that you can come to the plate 10 times and you only have to get on base 3 out of 10. But in trading, it's the same thing. You only have to be right 3 out of 10 times, but it's like how you look for risk reward. So it's small loss, small loss, small loss, big win, small loss, big win, right? So how do we look at that in our life? How do we look at risk reward and have asymmetric risk reward in our diet, in our movement practices, in our sleep hygiene, in our play, in our work, in our relationships, right? You could even think about return on investment for love languages. Let's just say that like my love language is gift giving, right? So I go out and I buy an expensive necklace for my wife, Kara, and I come home with this necklace and I'm all excited about it. Maybe it costs, I don't know, whatever, a couple $1,000s, let's say. And her love language might be quality time or physical touch or acts of service. Like what she really might want was for me to take the kids for 1 hour so she can take a bath, like more than any necklace in the world, right? So I give her this expensive necklace and there's no return on it, right? It's like there's a big risk. I spent a lot of money on it, but like small return. For her, I could just go take the kids for an hour or two, take them out of the house for her to get a massage. It doesn't actually cost a lot of money, but there's a huge reward. Yeah. Right. So it's like knowing like how we give and receive love and how our partners give and receive love and what are the risk rewards to different scenarios and looking at it like that. I mean, I know it's hard you don't want to think of love necessarily as like a financial model, right? But because it's like, it's not something you can quantify, but just as like a metaphor.
Yeah. The concepts still apply. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great. And it's something that, I'll think about for sure because, we've been together since we were 16, little 3-year siesta in the middle.
Very healthy.
But, I catch myself sometimes, even though I say, I'm never done learning. I'm never done learning about Chase. I always want to be curious about who he is now and then now and then now. But it's a reminding because we do know each other so well. And so when I hear something like that, it's a good reminder for me and encouragement for us because we've been together for so long and it's easy to get into the patterns or like, oh, I know he likes that or I know he doesn't like that or that, I especially with the love languages. And so I think that those are really powerful concepts, whether you're new in a relationship or you've been together for a long time. And I'm going to be thinking about that for the love languages with you.
Yeah. And I'm going to dork out here for a minute.
Go for it.
We've talked about it because there's, you can have a personal financial profile as well. But in corporate finance, I've often looked at the balance sheet and the P&L and their relationship in a similar framework to health and how you can essentially prop up one or the other at a particular time. And the P&L could be the results that you're looking at in the mirror, but it could be at the cost of the balance sheet. And the balance sheet might be your endocrine system or something like your hormonal balance. And you can essentially conjure revenues or conjure profits in a particular way, but you've had to leverage from something on the balance sheet versus this relationship, the symbiotic relationship between the two. One is a holistic, both are a holistic expression of health. one would be internal, one might be external. But this relationship between, I've dorked out before, and we've talked about a lot in the way that we've started our business, as far as like, hey, let's not sacrifice our health and vitality from an inner business perspective by looking for something today, tomorrow, or in the short term. Let's kind of like develop the relationship between our overall hormonal system that is the business.
Yeah.
I would say also the health of our relationship. There's been plenty of times where not plenty, I'll say a couple, if I'm being honest, where we might have a charge in our relationship that feels unresolved, but we got to get a podcast out. And so we sit down and push record, and it's off. We can grind through it, but we can both feel it, that it's off.
Right.
And that there's still a charge that hasn't been resolved. We're not calling each other names or throwing things or anything like that, but when there's it's a little spicy, it's a little sticky. And we've gotten through a whole podcast before, gotten all the way through and been like, we can't use that. We need to resolve whatever there is here and then come back to this, because we are not willing to sacrifice this just to get the podcast out or just to get likes or whatever. And I'm very proud that we've done that from the beginning, because I know people personally who kind of skate through that and maybe don't spend as much time on the relationship piece, but flash it on Instagram or social media of, how healthy they are. And then it comes out that like, actually they're separating or whatever. And it's a good reminder, for us, because, I'm really proud that we've done that from the beginning, that we don't use this, that this comes before the podcast or business or whatever.
I think it speaks to the success of the podcast personally, because ultimately, whether or not people realize it or not, they're going to be resonating with the frequency you're projecting.
Right. Yeah.
And so if you're talking about, like, let's say abundance, but you're resonating, discord.
Totally.
They're going to feel that, and it's going to come off as inauthentic.
Totally.
The thing about relationships that are so interesting is that the word relationship has the key code inside of it. It says re-elation. Ship. The idea is that the relationships are a ship, or like a carrying vehicle to be re-elated. Imagine every time you see your partner, it's like you saw them for the first time after not seeing them for 10 years, right? And it's like realizing that in each moment that this person is a new person, and that this person might not be the same person that you met in the last conversation.
Yeah.
To be re-elated, like, wow, what an amazing thing. Like, here I am living with you, and what are you up to? Like, what's new for you? Like, we're constantly thinking of taking the moments for granted. And I do the same thing too. I mean, gosh, I have 3 kids, and it's like life can get heavy with responsibilities and work and kids and all the kind of stuff. But to wake up each moment, to see each moment, and to look at the person like a new person and be learning from them, and to be elated to be with them like a long lost friend that you haven't seen since college or something like that. I think that's what relationships are really like leading us to be. It's like each moment, letting the love in the moment be the guiding force, and not this piece of paper that says that we need to be together. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think just having that choice to look at your partner in a novel way, with the idea and the expectation that they're going to continue to expand and grow and change. And if that curiosity can be just a core foundational element of a relationship, you'll experience novelty all of the time, which is such a nutrient for having presence, for having the spark that everybody is, so searching for in romantic relationship. Novelty is a huge ingredient. And I think that instead of just like trying to take a new vacation every other month or so to spark novelty, you can actually do it at a foundational level by understanding and choosing to see your partner as if they are new on a consistent basis.
Yeah. It makes me think of something in the dorking out category because you got me tickling. So in my system, in addition to the 8 keys to mastery, which we can get into at any time or not, but we could always
we will,
do another
for sure.
time.
Yes.
But I also take people through how to develop a process for your business and how to develop a process for yourself. So one of the things you're making me think about is that the first thing is defining and developing what is your competitive edge. When I worked for Paul Tudor Jones, the first thing he asked me and would ask anyone who was trying to come on board literally was, how do you define how it is that you make money in 1 to 2 sentences at an elementary school reading level, right? It's like simplicity is the greatest sophistication, right? So it's like, it'd be asking you, what is it about your podcast that makes it great, that separates you and differentiates you from everyone else? So once you have this idea of what creates stable, repeatable returns in your business, you need to think about, okay, how am I going to size my investments based off of that? So when I have an opportunity with a really big edge, a really big competitive edge that's in alignment, like maybe it's a product that you develop, or maybe it's a guest that's a really good fit for you, you're going to put all of, that's where you want to be putting all of your energy, or what we call unit sizing. You want to invest in maybe a lot of marketing or something like that in somebody who's really in accordance with your edge. And when you don't have, when it's a guest or a product or something that's not kind of in your core competency or in alignment with your competitive edge, you would go smaller. Now, the reason I'm talking about this, from what you brought up, is that a lot of traders and a lot of investment people might know this. Right, I've asked a lot of them, okay, tell me about your competitive edge. How is it that you make money? A lot of them don't even know. They start fumbling around. But some will say, okay, I do this. I have this strategy, and here's how I look at my units. And I say, well, what about in your life? What is your competitive edge of being a human, right? What is the best diet that works for you? What is the best movement practice? What is the best sleep hygiene? How much sleep do you need? 6, 7, 8? How do you know? And all these different things, what kind of learner are you? Do you like to learn in groups, alone, work virtually, work in person? Do you need a coach, a mentor? Do you need a boss pushing on you? Once you understand these things, and this is getting me to the balance sheet idea, is that then you use your units, which are your energy, your time, your money, and your resources, and your attention and presence, according to what your competitive edge is, right? So you start investing in relationships that are supportive of you with your time, energy, money, and resources, etc. And so there's a lot of interesting ways to look at this, but I think we kind of walk through life blindly, and it's really identifying like what really works for us. We are individuals. There's no two people alike. We all know there's not one other person in the history of the world that will ever have our fingerprints. The key to our success is recognizing that we are the asset. We are the technology, right? So it's like, what is it that makes me great at what I do in my business and my life, and then investing everything into that? That's the number one thing, because if not, you're literally trying to be somebody else, or you're part of somebody else's process. And this gets me to a really interesting thing that's been on my mind lately that I want to throw out there. Yeah. It's this whole idea of AI.
Oh my gosh, I would love to hear your thoughts.
Well, I'm like not an expert on this by any means, but I'm just thinking about it from a competitive edge standpoint, because what AI can do is sort of all of these incredibly amazing computations pulling from the internet at like incredibly rapid speeds. And I find that what we're trying to do as humans in society is actually play those games. We're mostly left brain dominant, doing analysis and logical stuff. And essentially, I worry that we're going to get wiped out by computers if we keep doing that. And so for me, I've been thinking about what is our competitive edge? What actually differentiates us from computers, right? How do we not play their game? And for me, it's the fact that we have 4.9 billion years of evolution pumping through our cells and veins.
Yeah.
So talk about market research, right?
Right.
We have a heart, and our heart is so intelligent, is so wise. Heart math proves this through thousands of different experiments, but our heart can actually connect with way more intelligence than we have locally inside of ourselves. Our heart has the ability to connect with others. Our heart has the ability to do future prediction, proven by science. We have our gut instincts. We have the intelligence of our microbiome that computers don't have. and we can dream.
Mm-hmm.
And like for me, I work so much with dreaming and with my clients and my work that dreaming is like the most incredible technology. It's like we have this perfect algorithm in our mind where every night we go to sleep and we don't have to do anything. All we have to do is pay attention and remember and engage with this incredible symbolic code that comes to us, the most perfected code. Like the best AI in the world could never even come close to the genius of the intelligence of the code in our own mind when we're dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
And so like we have to get back to our competitive edge. What it means to be truly human so that we can compete in this world of AI. And that gets back to, if you want to do that, you have to take care of your body. Your body has to be clean enough so you can actually engage with these things. You have to get to sleep on time. You have to move your body. You have to do what you love to do. You have to engage with creativity. You have to engage with your dreaming. You have to have big dreams. You have to listen to your heart, and all these different things. And I really worry that if we don't actually, and this is exactly why I made this course, because I teach these skills about how to connect with your heart, how to get in coherence, how to work with your dreaming, how to get your body in order so you can actually engage in this intelligence. Because if we don't actually integrate the parts with the whole, the left brain and the right brain, we're going to get wiped out because we're playing somebody else's game on somebody else's turf. We can never compete with the computer. And in that way, the computer also doesn't have values, right? I mean, they have human-generated values, but if you ask a computer a question like, is this medication good for me? Is vaccinations good for me? Is this good for me? Whether or not it's, we can get into the whole idea of censorship and what it actually has access to, which is a whole nother topic, because what is it actually pulling from? It might be a curated data set.
Yep.
But even if it had, there's so much information out there that are on both sides to every coin, right? You can say, are cold showers good for me? You could probably find 100 research papers that say it's good for you and 100 research papers that say that you should take warm showers.
Right.
So ultimately, what does it come down to? That the AI doesn't have discernment. It can't actually make the decisions for what's best for us. It's looking at all of us as a data set, and we're not data sets. Mm-hmm. We're actually individuals. And that's what the medical system is doing too. It's looking at us as averages, but we all have our own stories. We all have our own trauma stories. We all have our own experiences and injuries and lives and dreams. We are all individuals. And if we don't get back to what it means to be a truly human individual, I really worry about where we're going. And so I think more so than ever, these things are essential.
Amen. Yeah. That was an amazing riff.
Snaps for Jason.
This is so critical, this connection because I think many would say that these various practices of identifying yourself, finding yourself, leaning into your own health and vitality, kind of clearing the cobwebs out of your own psyche in order to truly, highlight what is you and innately you. But the next question in the rational world might be like, well, how do you make money doing that? How do you earn a living? How do you support a family and, follow the script of life by all of this self-work? I've got to do something in the world too. Yeah. But I think how you're now pivoting a lot of these practices is into a way that can actually be productive by the world's terms. And so maybe we can get into this idea of abundance and some of these practices that we've been talking about and how that translates to wealth.
Yeah.
I think if you looked up an abundance coach on Instagram, you'd find someone saying, manifest $1 million in your bank account by following, these 5 steps or whatever, or set money around your house, set $100 bills, in secret spots around your house so that you'll continue to find, there's these manifestation tricks all over the place for having money just show up into your life. But how does this now translate into wealth? And I think some of it is like finding your competitive edge.
Yeah. Well, it's so cool. I looked up the word wealth, and wealth etymologically comes from the word well-being. And well-being comes from the word wheel. And we could even take it further. Wheel comes from chakras. So to be wealthy really means to be fully embodied in your energy centers and in your chakras, right? And there's this concept of the wheel, in that like true wealth is when you're engaging in the wheel of life in reciprocity. It feels more wealthy to have net impact than to have net worth. Wealth is not about how much you accumulate, but it's about how your wealth is performing, how it's making an impact, how it's cycling through the world. That's real wealth. That's real abundance. But when I took this kind of chain down from wealth to well-being to wheel to chakras, I then realized that, okay, the key to wealth is then in the chakras. So I generated my 8 steps to well-being, the 7 chakras, and the 8th one being this like representation of kind of our higher self off of the chakra system. So the first one in my system is you got to do what you love to do. Surrender to your passion. If you look at anybody in the world who's great at what they do, Bruce Lee, Einstein, the top investor, whatever you want to do, Picasso, they love their work.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like if you want to put in the 10,000 hours or the whatever, it takes, the blood, sweat, and the tears and all of the equity needed to actually be great at something. If you want to be the best at something, it's not going to be sustainable if you don't love it.
Yeah.
And so I take you through a lot of different things. And some of them we talked about looking at what you love to do as a 7-year-old and what were the processes behind that to give you clues on how you can find your passion now, using your death as a spiritual advisor. What are you most passionate now? Well, if you only had 1 week to live, I'd certainly think you'd be really focused on what's the most important to you, right? So these are some of the ways that, and I have many, many exercises, if anything, too many in my course because I'm very thorough. But in the first step, it's like really, that's the first chakra. Do what you love to do. And that's key to making money because imagine you're a doctor who, you always wanted to be an artist. And your family said to you, okay, Chase, you want to be an artist, but you'll never make money being an artist. In our family, you either need to be a doctor or a lawyer. That's it. So then you go to medical school, you become a doctor, but then you're likely going to become the doctor who's just like punching in for the 8-hour shift, not pushing the edge of medicine and digging into research and looking for new ideas. It's like, I'm just going to collect my paycheck. I'm not passionate about this. Yeah. But if you always wanted to be a doctor, you're going to be the one who's on the cutting edge of research and actually making like technological advancements to better society, most likely, or you at least have the potential to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's where it starts. It comes from like, if you want to be the best, if you want to make a lot of money and have a big impact, you got to love what you do.
Yeah.
The second one is the second chakra, and this is our sexual energy and our creative power, and that comes into Paul Chek's 4 doctors, embodiment. Anyone who wants to be great at what they do has to treat themselves like an athlete. You have to train for work, right? We have this thing totally disconnected, but you have to eat right for your job. You have to sleep right for your job. Yeah. You have to move your body according to your job's needs and according to, maybe you're sitting a lot of work, so then you have to move more. If you're a gardener, for example, maybe you need less exercise. But this is an individuated plan, right? You have to eat right for you so you can perform at your best. You have to move your body right so you have enough energy and so you're healthy enough to have a sustainable career. And you have to have enough sleep, reflection, introspective time so that you can actually make better decisions. And you can, sleep is obviously the best investment, the risk-free investment you can make so that you're full of energy for the next day, right? And you have to have play in your life. Paul's 4 doctors, Dr. Happy, Dr. Quiet, Dr. Diet, Dr. Movement, Dr. Happiness. You have to have happiness in your life and play, or it doesn't make life worth living. So that's the first 2. The third one gets to what I call poise. And here it gets into ergonomics, okay? So what I found is that the more I learned about ergonomics and how I set up my desk, setting up my desk for optimal breathing, that breath and oxygen is the platform of being abundant. The oxygen is the platform of mental clarity and alertness and energy and intuition and getting out of fight or flight and into rest and digest or parasympathetic, where we can get out of like thinking yesterday equals today and being open to new possibilities, right? We have to be able to have good posture and good poise when we're sitting. So this all, there's tons and tons of exercises, but essentially it's teaching you how to set up your desk. When I was on Wall Street, everyone had a sit desk with like really crappy chairs. When I started learning about these things, I literally had to cut my desk out from the row of like 400 people and put in a standing desk.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there's like 400 people sitting, and I'm like the one like grasshopper, or what are they, something like coming out of the hole. Like the only one popped up. And I'm like standing, I'm like sitting on a Swiss ball. I have like a dental chair, this like dynamic dental chair, or I'm kneeling on this pad on the ground, or I'm doing all sorts of funky things. And so I had to learn, okay, what's the right height for my desk? We treat everybody, when we go to school when we're kids, it doesn't matter if you're 6'2", or 4'8",
Right.
you're sitting in the same freaking desk. You know, your feet aren't on the ground or your knees are in your chest. And it's like, we don't have any kind of individuated setup. So the whole idea is just like you need to individuate and do what you love to do. You need to individuate with your diet, your exercise, your happiness, and your quiet routine, right? There's a million diet books out there, but we have more obese people than ever because what works for somebody else doesn't work for us. This is all about finding what works for us. And that's key to success. The third one is setting up your desk so that you can sit for a long period of time, not be in pain, and actually perform at your best. So how to set up your desk, what height, how to have optionality, how to stand at your desk, kneel or sit, how to sit on 4 or 5 different chairs, where to put your keyboard, where to put your mouse, what's the right height for the monitors, how to have a headset. And go on and go on and go on. Even on your commute and on traveling, I'm teaching all of these little hacks and all of these little biofeedback tools that I learned so that I know that wherever I go in all positions, I'm having enough oxygen so that I can perform my best. And this goes into some more metaphorical things about posture too, is like, what do we stand for? You know, what are our deepest values? Like when I sit down at my desk, I need to know, like, what's my why? Why am I here? Who are my clients? You know, why am I doing this? And all of those things really cultivate into a bigger level of success for me. For, you know, what I found in my career and what I've integrated now. Yeah. The fourth one is coherence, where we realize that the longest journey we have to take, we all know, is from the mind to the heart. But the heart has so much wisdom. We've talked about that a little bit. We've already talked about that a little bit. But the heart has access to so much stuff that we can't do with our ordinary mind. Right? The heart math talks about these exercises, these experiments they did, where they have people looking at a screen, and you may have heard about this, but they're looking at a screen, and they're gonna put up an image of either like a beautiful woman breastfeeding her daughter or son, or like a car crash. And the people that are watching them don't know what's coming next, and they're hooked up to all sorts of sensory devices. They have proven time and time again that the heart can actually predict, based on like the rising of the blood pressure or the heart rate variability or the beats, what's going to come up 5 seconds before the thing is actually flipped onto the screen.
That's wild.
And the same kinds of things show up when they look at random number generators that are placed around the world. So, random number generators are doing these like, random zeros and ones around the world. And they can show that at times when, for example, like Princess Diana's death or September 11th or some of these big global events. And I have a lot of stories too about how I use those things to make money on Wall Street, but I'm not sure we'll have time to go into those. But the point being is that the heart math research showed that on these big global scale events, all these random number generators around the world all went into coherence, all went into synchronization together around these major times. Wow. But the trippy thing is they all started doing it 2 to 3 hours before the events happened. Wow. And this is all proven, scientifically. So the heart has so much wisdom. So that's 4. Getting our mind, our heart, and the intelligence of our body all in sync. The 5th one is this idea of developing our center. We're living in this world of like all these distractions. Like, when I was trading, there's like 6 screens in front of me. There's like CNBC. There's like unbelievable amount of phones. There's like work phone, personal phone.
It looks like the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah.
The trading floor, when I was at the power and utilities company, you'd go up into the trading floor and you're like, the blue light exposure is like off the charts.
It's crazy. So like, of course, there's like practices of centering and grounding, earthing and like getting back into your core. And it's also learning about that, like these distractions are the death of the flow state, right? So like we may think like, oh, I'm just going to check my phone for 1 minute because it's just a quick text message. I'm just going to shoot this off to somebody. But it's not so much about how long the activity takes that pulls us away. It's how long is it going to take us to get back into the flow state after.
Yeah.
So it's like learning how to, as Paul would say, learning how to say no so that we can have a real yes. Getting rid of the distractions, tracking our time. So much of us focus on where our money's going, but we don't focus on where our time or our energy is going. Once we spend our time or our energy, it's not coming back. We can spend money and it can be returned back to us, even sometimes with even more than we gave. Right?
Yeah.
So, that's in 5. It's like, and it's also a little bit about what we were talking about spiritually. It's like developing that center, recognizing that I am the one who is sensing I'm recognizing I'm smelling, I'm recognizing I'm seeing, and I'm hearing, and I'm seeing all of these screens and all these things. But who's the one that's actually doing that? I am not my senses. I am not the object of my senses. And I'm not going to allow the objects of my senses, the sensory world, to pull me around.
Yeah.
I have to be centered in myself and decide where I'm going to go, what I'm going to pay attention to, what I'm going to say yes or no to, what's is an allowable distraction, and what's a priority. Peter Drucker says, first things first, second things never. That's number 5. Just to go quickly through these, number 6 is open focus. So in flow states, they talk a lot about this idea of having a really kind of narrow and immersed focus, where you're just like honed in on one thing and you're completely immersed. But what I've learned is that actually one of the keys that I have to success is attentional flexibility. And so open focus talks about that there's actually 4 different types of ways to pay attention. There's a diffused way, there's an immersed way, there's a narrow, and an objective. And all of these, and I could talk a little bit more about these, but there's all these different ways to pay attention. So think about like a martial artist. A martial artist might at the beginning be in a very open state, right? A very diffuse state where they're taking kind of it all in. Maybe they're being sort of objective. They're analyzing everything, but they're diffuse in that they're not putting their attention into any one thing. And then there becomes this moment of attack where they're like, in a split second, they become very narrow and very immersed. And then after, they move back into this more open state of attention where they're like they're hearing the sounds, they're noticing their own body, they're looking at their opponent, they're looking at the environment, they're noticing all these things. The same thing on a trading floor. You're sitting there, you're looking at your screens. If you're only focusing on one thing, you're excluding everything else. You want to be in a situation where you're taking in all the information. There's a richness to information of, again, like of what makes sense for you, but you're taking in, you're exploring all these things. You're not overloaded, because it's very stressful on our nervous system to like narrow in on one thing, like an iPhone all the time, right? We're meant to be out in nature looking at the landscape in this more like open way. So you kind of sit back, you're noticing the feelings in your body, you're noticing the space between you and the screen. I'm noticing the space between us three right now, the space in the room, the space in between my ears, the space in between my eyes, like all these different prompts. I'm listening to sounds, and now my body's relaxed and I'm taking a lot of information. And then maybe there's a number that's going to come out where there's going to be a release of some financial news. Then I start to like narrow in, and then I'm objectively analyzing, okay, what's the number? What is this positive or this negative? And then there's a moment of immersion where my body just knows what to do, and I either make a karate chop or I make a trade or something. And then at the end, to relax, I come back into that open state. So teaching people about this attentional flexibility is really key to health, but also performing at your best. The last 2, 7 is, I think, was one of your favorites, is losing your mind to find your genius.
Yeah, I love that.
I call these microdose meditations. So I give the people in my course all of these little ways to kind of get out of your ordinary mind. Like, one of the easiest ways to get out of your ordinary mind is to create a childlike mind. A child's like mind is open to new possibilities. There's wonder, there's curiosity, and so, doing walkabouts in nature or doing little creative exercises that I teach from my process work studies. The idea is we get so locked into like one idea of doing things. And like businesses now know that like when people hit like points of that where they can't have breakthroughs, they devise games or play or like retreats or meetings outside or move your desks around. Google's like constantly moving people around and doing things like that, I've heard. And so, having this kind of like altered state in a way, and of course, we talk a lot about altered states on our own, but altered states can be done obviously in Peru with a shaman or, things like that. But we can also find like little mini ways, like little microdoses, 30 seconds, a little minute, just to alter our state in small ways to get access to new ways of thinking about things. And then finally, we're in the flow state. Once we cultivate all of those 7 things, all of our chakras are embodied. We're doing what we love to do. We're taking care of our body. We're breathing right. We have optimal posture and oxygen. We're integrated with our mind and our heart. We've eliminated distractions. We're attending properly. We're transcending our beliefs and our ordinary mind. And then we're dancing with abundance in the flow state. And then in that moment, we realize that, kind of like the bodhisattva, we're not really abundant until everyone's abundant. And that's where we really recognize this idea of it being a wheel, and that what we have to do with this is actually make it so that we all benefit from it.
That's a
powerful, man.
Beautiful way to end that amazing rant, because
yes, it was a rant. So
no,
I apologize.
I love it. We're ranty people ourselves, so we love it. But that's so funny. My eyes just went over to the etymology encyclopedia
Oxford Dictionary.
or dictionary. Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah, well,
I just zeroed in on that.
And that's a perfect example of a microdose meditation, right? Yep. That's how you transcend your mind, by going with like what nature is presenting to you in the moment. Mm-hmm. So if you were here working and like you noticed something like that, or you were stuck on a problem, and you could just look around the room and see what catches your attention. There's something in that could be meaningful for you to help solve this big problem you're doing. So that's exactly what I would recommend to you as as an example of how to transcend your ordinary mind.
Yeah.
Just like a kid, what's calling me right now?
Yeah.
And there's some meaning in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you I don't know if you coined the term, but we certainly heard it from you first, I think, this concept of flirts.
Yeah, I definitely didn't coin it, but I use it a lot.
Nature flirts. And we talked about that last time you were on the podcast, and it really did feel like that. Like if we were outside and a bird was flirting with me, I might engage with it, or just focus on it only, or like ask it if, hey, is there a message or something like that.
Totally.
And, with this book, I know people, if you're just listening, can't see, but we're in this amazing library where there's thousands and thousands and thousands of books of Paul Chek's, and I zero in on this one book, etymology, an etymology dictionary, which you've just said a little while ago, like get yourself an etymology dictionary. So if I was maybe stuck or just not feeling super flowy or creative or whatever, and you get a flirt like that, it's like, I need to pick that book up.
Yeah.
And I need to flip through it or ask my soul, like, what page or whatever. And I think that those flirts are so simple that they get overlooked and maybe disregarded as not super powerful. Yeah. But I think we've probably all experienced that, where we just like randomly like connect with something and go with it. And it's like, man, I'm so glad I did that. What if we did that on purpose? Which is, something you talk about a lot.
What if the whole world, what if everything we experience was just there flirting with us? Mm-hmm. What if it was like a teenage boy or girl just wanting to send us a little love note across the table, right? Mm-hmm. Imagine engaging with life like that, where everything is one big flirt, that everything is there as part of a co-dreaming. It's there to flirt with you, to wake you up to your greatest potential, to something that to perform at your best, to feel at your best, to awaken to something that might be a shadow material for you. Everything in nature is part of this like co-dream, and in some way we're dreaming it up. And these flirts are like, they're relational to us. It's something that our unconscious is paying attention to out there. Like we've all had this experience of saying, I want to buy a red car. And then wherever we go, we start to see like red cars, right? Yeah. Everyone knows that, right? Because there's something that like our unconscious is then just paying attention. There's probably not any more red cars on the road, but we're just noticing that. Yep. What if all of these things we notice, these fleeting sensations, these non-verbal hunches, these body symptoms, these little twitches, these things in nature, these colors that catch our eye, what if all of them were there to flirt with us? Yep. Mm-hmm. I mean, to me, when I turned over to that way of life, thinking that the divine itself is actually just waiting to flirt with me, just waiting to tap me on the shoulder and waiting for me to turn around and talk to her or him or they really and say, hey, yeah, I'm here. I've been waiting for you. Yeah. And so what if the universe is like that, where everything that's happening is just a big... it's just flirting. It's just flirting with us. It's like it's so attractive.
I think we assume that we need to go through an educational system or read a bunch of books or even work with a mentor in order to gain access to this knowledge and to this wisdom that can lead to happiness, health, wealth. But what we have at our disposal, what we can look at, these flirts that we're getting from our environment constantly have so much. If you so just choose to give the time to thinking about what it could potentially mean for you, your subconscious just needs a little bit of context because it is so infinitely wise if you only give it the time and the ability to make meaning out of something.
Yeah. Well, one thing that you just echoed, and I wanted to echo Jason as well, is if we treated everything like flirts and all of that and how powerful that is, it requires us to slow down. You can't flirt with something if you're go, on the move, not even paying attention to the flirt. There could be someone in a coffee shop that's trying to get your attention or trying to get your eye or send you a smile. If you're in and out or just on your way, you're not going to be able to engage with the flirt. And you just mentioned it, if we give it the time. And I think that something that I'm worried about with AI is that it seems like as humans, we are speeding up. Time is almost condensing, and that days feel like they're shorter, years feel like they're shorter, months, weeks, and etc. And it makes me think that AI is speeding us towards something, because now we don't even want to use Google. We don't even want to look through the Google searches. We want the AI, like ChatGPT. We want the AI to search for us and just give us the answer, because we don't have time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that, right? And it's so crazy that we're continuing to speed things up when really the prescription, at least in this conversation, is to slow down enough so that we can flirt with what's coming at us in our life, in our relationship, in nature. And it's sort of frustrating for me when we talk to someone like you and it's oh yeah, I'm lit up by this and we need to slow down and flirt. But there's so much noise and external that we don't have any control over. ChatGPT is just going to continue to speed things up.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on us working against, or I don't even know how to think about it, because it's such a strong or a powerful force that we almost have to push against and push through to slow down.
Yeah. Wow. So I want to say one thing about flirts, because that was in there too, so I don't feel like I'm going too far off. One of the best ways that I've learned to just quickly work with a flirt is to ask yourself, if I could see through that object, through their eyes, at me, what would I see and what would I want to tell myself? What's the tip? How do I see myself through the flirt, right? So if I see a bird, look from the bird's perspective back at yourself and see what some insight might be. And these things, they're so easy. I'll give an easy example that people can understand. We've all had a song that's been in our head, right? You wake up in the morning, no matter what, the song is there and it's playing over and over again. You're I can't get this annoying thing out of my head. Well, what if it actually wasn't an annoying, random, meaningless thing, but actually there is a messenger? What if that song was just a way for your unconscious or the deepest part of yourself trying to get your attention through any means possible?
When I'm singing annoying songs, it's a message, by the way.
Well, actually, this is one of the things. So one of the flirts is you get a song in your head randomly. We could do exercises on this now, but the idea is a song comes to you and you're singing it, to just actually think to myself, why is this song coming to me right now? Because usually it's sort of completely random. You start singing a whatever from somewhere in the past. And then, okay, what is the feeling quality of this song? What's the essence of the song? What's the tempo? What's the rhythm? What's the mood? What are the words? What does it make me feel? If I was going to do a little dance or a movement, how would I move this song? And then how is that meaningful for my life right now? Right? So it's these flirts come everywhere. We just have to open to them. I mean, it could be a fantasy. When we're kids, we're sitting in class, we're looking out the window, and the teacher says, "Oh, stop doing that. Pay attention." A good teacher would say, "Why don't you go outside? Go check that out. Do that more. Encourage that." It's there's something that needs, when we catch ourselves having fantasies or catching flirts or songs in our head or little things that we notice in nature, don't write them off. amplify them, open up to them, and then explore what is it about that song? What is it about that little synchronistic experience that's happening right now?
Yeah.
What is the meaning in that for me in my life?
Yeah.
It's mirroring how you answered my question earlier in the conversation of, not spiritually bypassing. Let's not bypass the flirts and just kind of slough it off as like, oh, it's an annoying song in my head. Or, the same goes with a negative emotion or a negative experience. It's like, that's, kind of what you were saying is like, be with it. Don't bypass it, sit with it, really feel it in the moment. And it just reminded me of that connection there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's true. I mean, that's really just opening up to all of life, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to pull the thread on a bit more, and it's a topic and a conversation I think people have heard of, but it's this idea of flow and flow state. And there's some cool books out there, and I think it's another word that gets thrown around. But the way that you've showed the architecture of sequence in order to get to flow makes so much sense.
Well, I'll tell you something really interesting about that, because I did a deep dive into flow, because it is one of those words. It's like flow this, flow that. And there's a lot of great stuff out there. I mean, Jamie Wheel and Stephen Kotler talk a lot about flow. I think their project's called the Human Genome Project. Incredible stuff. Hats off to them. They give credit to a gentleman named Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which is a very difficult name to say, but a really cool author and educator who has really good TED Talks and things like that. They're a little bit slow, to be honest, but he has a lot of really good information. And so there's a lot of different things you can point to. They can point to that, we know in flow states we're 500 times more productive than when we're not in flow. So they talk about you could literally show up to Monday and be in flow and be more productive than if you showed up Monday through Friday and not be in flow.
Dude, that's so true.
You can be multiple time more creative. You can have access to future prediction, pattern recognition, and it's actually good for your immune system, right? And so they talk about all these different things, and they talk about a few key ways, like you have to have a rich environment and deep embodiment and be immersed in what you're doing. There's a lot more to it. Csikszentmihalyi talks about this challenge to skills ratio, how you want to be doing something slightly above your ability, right? And that all of these things actually bring deep satisfaction. But for me, like, that wasn't enough to really know, like, okay, I get it, but I don't really know how to cultivate this. So I went back. And so Csikszentmihalyi brings it back to William James, who's a American psychologist in the late 1800s. But then when I was digging into William James, I was realizing that he was a deep student of yoga. And so then I realized that the 8 limbs to Ashtanga yoga are literally these keys, which is then I based my course off of those 8 limbs. My 8 steps come from literally an ancient practice. So what I realized that flow states, cultivating perfection and mastery and feeling at your best and performing at your best at the highest level is what makes us human. It's ubiquitous to all of us. It's tens of thousands or more of years old. It's the most ancient practice of being human. It's actually getting back to what we were meant to do and designed to be. We are flow people. We're designed to live in flow. And so flow are these times when we're like completely immersed in our work, and like time is just flying by and we're feeling good and performing at our best, And the thing is that for my 8 steps, I realized like you can do this for anything in your day. Like, let's just take a baseball player, for example. I don't know why, but like, number 1, you got to love what you do. Right? You got to love baseball. 2, you got to take care of your body. You got to get in the gym. You got to get in the batting practice. You got to eat right. You got to sleep. I mean, not all of them do that, but like ultimately, like that's how you're going to perform at your best and have longevity, right? 3, you got to have the right poise in the batter's box, right? There's a 100-mile-per-hour pitch coming at you. You got to have some poise there.
Right.
4, you got to regulate your breathing and like slow down your heart rate and access, integrate your whole body, right? Get into coherence. 5, you got to eliminate distractions. The things that are coming into your mind, all of the fan noise, all of the things that could come in to distract you. 6, you got to have this attentional flexibility. You got to be able to like look at the picture, but also notice what's going on peripherally, right? Like look behind you at the catcher or like notice with the first base coach or the third base coach, you have to have this kind of open vision. 7, you got to transcend your mind. You got to escape from the inner critic or learn how to work with the inner critic. In fact, in my course, one of the things that they talk about in flow states is that they say you silence the inner critic. And I do think in these moments of complete immersion, the inner critic does get silenced. But then I ask you, what about like 364 and a half other days of the year? And so I work with people on one of the exercises in my course is actually harnessing the power of your inner critic, learning how to flow with your inner critic. And sometimes like critics can actually have something positive, right? Like there's all different types of critics. There's some that are really bad that you just need to beat up and tell them to get lost. But there could be some that are actually there to like coach you. Like if you're going to like get a cookie at 10 o'clock at night when you know, and there's a voice there saying, hey dude, you shouldn't do that. That's actually like a positive critic. You know what I mean?
Constructive criticism.
Yeah. But if it's someone saying like, hey, you know, you're a loser, like, okay, sometimes you need to tell them to, you know, screw off. But there's actually an interesting energy in the critic that sometimes that we can pick up. And this is where it gets very difficult. But even in times when we've been abused and we've had trauma, right? There is an energy, not in the way that it was done to us, but there could be something to cultivate in the energy of the abuse or in the trauma or in the uncomfortable situation for how that could be something that we need right now in our life.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this whole baseball thing is like, those are the steps. And then you're in 8, you're hitting a home run, you're in flow. The same thing though can be broken down to like really simple, like when you're making your coffee. Make coffee in a way, like, you know, do something you love. You love to make coffee. Make your mushy love. Okay. You love your mushy love. It's good for your body. When you're making it, like have a posture about it.
Yeah.
Watch your breathing when you're making on it, right? Eliminate distractions. Get really focused in it, like feel your body. Look at the smell the amazing ingredients, you know, looking at the texture, right?
You're making me want some mushy love.
Let it transcend your mind and alter your experience and be in flow. So it's like flow, there becomes a reversal where like flow becomes these like moments of time that we can cultivate to our whole life becomes a flow state.
Yeah, that's so
I'm
good.
So in love with this. Like, I think we do have systems that set you up to experience flow state, sports being one of them. I think, you know, other professions, I'm sure trading has this sort of like funnel that you step yourself through that hits on enough of these, maybe by happenstance, but it's the sort of structure that's set up to where you experience more flow than others. And I think it's an absolute tragedy that there aren't more systems in place for the general human being to experience flow consistently. And so what I love about this is putting in these structures and these systems that you can step through these various stages in order to present yourself an opportunity to experience what it's like to be in flow.
Yeah. Flow is fluidity.
Yeah.
Fluidity is, you know, fluency. Fluency is affluence. I mean, this is these words, and this gets back to all the water and the moving. Yeah. It's like this ability to roll and flow with life and to be present and to go with what's happening and let nature work with you, not against you. You know, to be open up for life's events to be working for you, not against you, right? Not resisting what's happening. All of these things are part of a flow state, and all of that kind of like marries up to abundance. And you talked about the abundance archetype, which we didn't actually get into the word archetype, but I think that would be a whole long thing. It's a really tricky word, but thinking about in my model, the archetype is this organizing motif. It's like this source code. It's like the North Star. It's like we need to know what abundance means for us.
Yeah.
And then that's what we're heading to. That's the archetype. That's the image that we're holding in our mind of this is what it means for me to be an individuated person, to be an actualized, self-actualized person, and this is what abundance looks like in my life, based on what I need and what my goals and dreams are, and then having that be the archetype that holds the whole container of your life.
Yeah,
beautiful,
so good.
Yeah, wow.
I know we could go for probably much longer. I'm kind of interested to ask you a few like rapid fire questions.
Oh boy.
We have a few that we ask a lot of guests that I don't think we asked you last time you were on. I want to circle back to your course at the end. If there's anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to.
Yeah, no. So I was just saying that in my course, it's actually a really interesting exercise I do that I cultivated this from Carlos Castaneda, who we talked about earlier with using your death as a spiritual advisor. He calls these people in our life petty tyrants. And so petty tyrants are these button pushers, these people that get under our skin, that disturb us. But actually, when we look at these petty tyrants as an opportunity to see, like, what can we learn or what can we grow? And the idea is, how do we learn to engage with them without becoming petty ourselves?
Yeah.
And when we do that, we can actually get the freedom and we can actually get a lot of growth out of it. So I'll give you an example. I have the same thing. I had a high school football coach who was a total hard ass on me. He was just really tough, and he was really critical on all of this. But so when I think about him as this petty tyrant, somebody who I really hated at that time, and of course now I could intellectualize all the stuff of the resiliency needing to go through that and the discipline that he instilled. But just from a really easy exercise perspective, is that you have somebody in your life, like let's say this coach. When I think about, if I wanted to do it in a hand movement, if I wanted to make a hand gesture that showed what was his energy like to me, and it was like this. It was like he was very critical, pointing his finger at me. And so if I I can really amplify that. You can stay with that energy and then try to see, without using it in the same way, how is there something in there that I need? And so if I'm thinking about, there's something that's very direct and cutting and speaking his mind. Now, he may not have had the tact in how to use it or the meta skills, but where can I use that more in my life? Where can I be more direct with, getting rid of distractions? Where can I be more clear on what my goals are or what my values are? Where can I be more clear and direct with my message, right? Where am I like that? Where am I too critical of others? Where am I critical of myself? Where do I already have that directness in me? It's something that I don't, or that I'm not using enough. So all of these people in our life, just like the flirts, these people that disturb us, there can actually be huge information about stepping into what is it that disturbs us about them. How are we like them even just a little bit?
Yeah.
And how do we actually need to use their power, maybe in a more constructive way, but how do we need to use the essence of what's disturbing them, disturbing us about them, constructively in our life?
Yeah. It's almost like homeopathy where you use a little bit of the disturbance, a little bit of the poison to actually build resiliency against the thing, and then you're better equipped to deal with the thing when it comes back to you.
And with the same homeopathic analogy, you got to find, where are you even a homeopathic drop like that person?
Yeah.
If I was just working on a post where I was talking about how, we have this idea of cancel culture. We cancel every opinion that is not similar to ours, right? Anyone who doesn't look like us, who doesn't think like us, who doesn't have the same opinions and beliefs. So take Trump, for example. Some people think he's the savior of the United States, and some people think he's the worst guy on the planet, right? But if you look at that, and you could say to yourself, even if you have either of those opinions, I'm not saying I'm for or against it, but where am I a little bit Trump-like?
Yeah.
So where am I a little bit egotistical? Where am I a little bit self-centered? Well, we certainly can find that, right?
Sure.
And the same side, where do I need a little bit more Trump in my life? And maybe it's not in the way that he's doing it, but where do I need to speak my mind without caring about what other people think, right?
Yeah.
So all of the things on the world stage, the Putins, the whomever that we're pointing the finger at, it's an opportunity to see where are we doing that? Where are we colonizing others? Where are we colonizing ourselves? Where have we're canceling people on the outside? Well, if everything's an image of the macrocosm, representing the microcosm, where have we canceled our own bodies? Where have we canceled our own dreams? Where have we canceled our own heart? We're out there trying to eliminate viruses without realizing that the viruses and microorganisms and bacteria outnumber our cells 10 to 1 in our own body.
Yeah.
Where are we canceling what's inside of ourselves? So all of these opportunities are really deep meditative reflection moments to think about these things that even the biggest challenges and disturbances are part of us in some way.
Yeah, I love that.
That's so true.
And it's so good. We love a good, useful segue. Speaking of Trump, I would love to hear from you some rapid fire questions. And then we kind of just jump back into the conversation. But I would love to hear from you. What's an unpopular opinion that you maintain that you would like to share? And you can go wherever you want. It doesn't have to pertain to anything we've talked about thus far. We like to expose our listeners to other people's unpopular opinions. And what we find is sometimes their unpopular opinion actually isn't that unpopular. So I just wanted to give you a chance and take as long as you need to think.
Well, there's probably many. Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, one of my favorite quotes from Carl Jung is that normal is the ideal aim of the unsuccessful. Right. So like in order to be a successful person, you have to have not normal ways of being in life. Yeah. So it's like, it's almost like a badge of honor. Like having unpopular theories is probably a good indication that you're actually a successful person.
Totally.
I mean, maybe not like hands down, but it could be a key indicator. One of the things I was thinking about, and again, this is not necessarily an unpopular position or unpopular viewpoint, but it's this whole idea of unpopular viewpoints. So we were talking about, the etymological dictionary. I was looking earlier at the etymological dictionary at the word conspiracy, and I wanted to say, like, what is that really about? Like, what are these unpopular decisions really about? And when I looked it up in the dictionary, which is interesting because I flirted with you earlier, it took me to the word spirit. That conspiracy comes from con spirit. Wow. And it actually came from the Latin word conspirare. And so when I looked up what conspirare meant, it meant to breathe together.
Wow.
Spirit, we've talked a little bit about this last time in the podcast about spirituality really meaning to breathe. Spirituality is something that we can't really put our fingers on, right? We try to talk about spirituality. We try to talk about, oh yeah, I'm spiritual. I did a little Instagram on this. I'm like, yeah, I'm spiritual. Yeah. But like, what does that actually mean? And the words in the English language, English language is an object-based language, in that it's like it's really good for talking about things in the material world. But what we're talking about with spirituality is, you can't describe it with things from this world, because what we're pointing to is something that doesn't come from this world.
Yeah.
We're literally saying, hey, I'm not from here. I don't identify with being here. There's something else that I'm connecting to, right? And so in that way that we can see how this sort of like, this thing that we can't touch is sort of like breath, sort of like the wind. We can't really get our hands on it, right? It's not something you can actually describe with words. It's something that you actually have to feel. So in that way, this conspiracy or this conspirit is like these conspiracy theories are like something that we really can't wrap our minds around. But what it's leading us to is that when we have these unpopular beliefs that we're calling conspiracy theories, it's an opportunity to breathe together. It's an opportunity to sit down with your neighbor, your loved one, whomever, and actually talk it out.
Yeah.
This gets me to this whole thing on, the Hindu Vedic culture. Back in ancient India, they would have these debates. And then debate's not really the right word, because debate means to beat. They're really more like discussions, or actually the correct word would be argument, because argument comes from the word argentum, which means silver. So the whole idea of having a proper argument is to polish the silver to find the truth.
Wow.
So you get these two guru types, these two wisdom teachers together. They'd have these 18-day long arguments. They would be discussing existential questions about what is the best way to live a life, or whatever it is, for like 12 hours a day for 18 days in front of huge audiences. Imagine, like, instead of going to a football game with 50,000 people watching, two teams beat each other up for 2 hours. And then, like, imagine if we were going with that intensity to watch like two of the most intelligent wisdom teachers on the planet having that kind of argument.
Well, we do that. We watch that. There are arguments, I suppose I'll use that word. We love to sit around on a Friday night. We get real wild and we watch Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson.
Right.
argue and they agree on a lot, but they also disagree on a lot. And these two gladiator minds. And you're just like trying your best to stay with every word that they're talking about, but it is like a gladiator type experience, and we love that kind of stuff. So that stuff is available, but definitely not 12 hours for 18 days straight.
Those were kind of ancient times when they didn't have YouTube and whatever. But the whole idea was that at the end of these 18-day long sessions, somebody would concede to the other one, and then that person would say, "Now you're my teacher." If you have a better way to do it, I'm your student. I'm not here out of any kind of egotistical, like I need to win. Right. I'm only here in search of the truth. In our culture, we don't even consider that like a worthy degree in school. Right? No. Like, I'm like, there's nothing that's like, okay, you're going to go study what it actually means to be human.
Yeah.
Right. We're like, that's bullshit. You need to study this one little slice of life. Yeah. But in ancient cultures, like those people were like, we would wash their feet out of respect. And so I think this is a long way of saying that my unpopular belief is that I'm open to unpopular beliefs.
I love that.
The whole idea of that, like we need to all sit down together and breathe together, and that every voice, everyone deserves a seat at the table. And even when you're working for a company, now maybe not everyone in a company has the same weight. Like the janitor probably shouldn't have the same weight as the CEO when it comes to like a major decision, but that even the janitor, the secretary, the person working in the parking garage, the HR department, the finance department, from the most junior level to the most senior level employee, every voice counts. And every part of ourselves counts. All of the things that are more primary to us and all of the secondary parts, our dreams, our heart, our gut, our flirts, all of these things deserve and need a voice at the table, and we need to learn to breathe together with all of them, because only then can we actually find the truth.
That's so good.
So well put.
I love that you just completely flipped the term conspiracy theory on its ass, because I think people use that term haphazardly to describe kind of in a derogatory way, like, oh, kind of disregarding. Oh, don't listen to them. They're just a conspiracy theorist, right? And what you're saying is like, actually, we need to sit down. We need to breathe together. Maybe the information that they have is rooted in truth and it's different than your information. And we can polish here together and come up with something that makes sense for both of us. Like, I love that so much.
Yeah. I mean, I think like I don't know a lot about the Bible, but this, because you mentioned it earlier, I think this whole idea of Jesus saying, whenever two or more gather, I'll be there. The reality is that the beauty is in the third.
Yes.
It's like when I sit down with you, I can't experience life, or I can't learn anything by myself.
Right.
When I sit down with you, or when the three of us sit down and we have this conversation and we share views and we breathe together, that's actually how we can obtain more information, more truth, and more divinity.
Yeah.
Right. So it's in this relationship that is the key.
Absolutely. I think about it all the time, but let's just use the example of, you've got somebody who supports Trump and somebody who supports Biden. And if they would be having a conversation about their differences on Twitter compared to delaying the conversation around Trump and Biden, but rather starting in the morning and spending an entire day together. Maybe they go on a walk together. If you're in our neck of the woods, you're in Coronado Island, California, we're going to take you to the beach. We're going to grab a coffee, maybe share a juice in the afternoon. We're going to bullshit about the weather and the sand and what we like to do for fun. And at the end of the day, we're going to sit down and break bread, share a bottle of wine, and talk about our differences between Trump and Biden.
Yeah.
I'd be curious about how productive that conversation looks compared to the conversation over Twitter. and there's something about being in the flesh with another human being. We miss these modes of communication that are energetic.
Yeah. This is getting back to the risk reward thing we talked about earlier. If we think about risk reward of what's the risk reward of sending somebody an email versus sending somebody a handwritten note. Right. I mean, it takes how many more minutes to write a handwritten note and put a stamp on it and put it in the mail. But if you received an email from me that said, "Oh, thank you for having me on the podcast," okay, great, it's nice. But what if you receive like like a handwritten note on nice stationery that I actually took the time to write and put in the mail, that would have a much bigger reward, for like us a little bit more risk of maybe 2 minutes more of my time. Right. It's literally like walking across the office and talking to somebody in person. It's being curious about somebody and engaging with them on a human level. It doesn't take that much more effort to do those things, and there's a huge reward to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that perspective. That's definitely a nugget I'm going to take from this conversation is throughout my day and life and projects is and even human interaction is kind of weighing and looking at the risk reward and what is the profound reward that I can get for not that much more risk, because guaranteed they're everywhere.
And the key to that, which is also in my course, is that you have to develop ways to address your feedback, right? So you have an edge, you have a theory. You put your unit sizes together of how much time, energy, money, resources you're going to put into this, right? Then you do what I call, you have to evaluate through feedback, and then you become a stalker of yourself. You stalk yourself about how is this working in my life? Where do I need to change? What habits are working for me or not working for me? What decisions am I making? I'm stalking my flirts. I'm stalking my dreams. I'm stalking my body symptoms. I'm stalking how I'm eating and how I'm moving, how that relates to my business and my relationships and how they all work together. You become like a detective. But the key to all that is feedback, right? So you try something out and you see how it works. You have to have systems of feedback to mirror it back to you. That's obvious in investing. If we put a trade on, we're going to have this is the strategy, here's the competitive edge, and here are the different factors of why I invested in this particular thing. And then you'd go back and you look at it. Where are the big winners? Where are the big losers? Where did I break from my process? What was the intersectionality around that? Did I have a fight with my wife and then I had a bad day at work? Or did I have a bad day at work and then I came home and had a fight with my wife?
Yeah.
And start actually paying attention to all these things and then adjusting and changing.
Yeah, I mean, being open to feedback from the marketplace. If you introduce a product into the marketplace and it's rejected to some degree, that's feedback for some level of fix that might need to take place in the process. And I think that even in this realm of, conspiracy theories, there's a product in the marketplace that is being rejected by many. And instead of reconsidering what that product looks like, it's to deny any other opposition that could contradict what that product's value is. And I think that's where we're just quickly labeling conspiracy theory or misinformation, because the market is starting to give feedback that the narrative, mainstream narrative, and pick whatever lane you would like, is not satiating, resonating, or fulfilling anybody currently. And instead of repositioning what product should be in the marketplace, we're just completely shutting down any potential opposition to it.
So there's this really fun thing. I'll just drop one more thing from my course about feedback. You're just really like priming me with all these great ideas. Is I introduced this concept called 721 feedback. So the first level of 721, the first 360 degrees, is this, we have all heard of this like 360 degree feedback where, you do feedback on yourself, you get feedback from a mentor, feedback from, let's say, friends and family or your coworkers or your spouse. But it's all in the objective realm. It's like, okay, let's just say I'm an investor. Okay, what was my performance? What were my numbers? Did I hit my goals? How did I utilize capital? What was the path that I got there? Was it really choppy or smooth? All of these like numerical metrics to looking at your performance, right? How many downloads did I get? How much engagement did I get? How many likes did I get? All those kinds of things. The next 360 degrees is everything subjective. So that could be like, what are my strengths and weaknesses? What do you think my strengths and weaknesses are? What are my communication skills? Where are my communication weaknesses, right? What are my dreams telling me about the process? What is my body telling me about this process? All of these things that you can't actually put numbers on, asking your partner, what's my mood been like lately? Right? That's a really challenging one.
Wow.
Yeah. And so all of these different things, that's a whole nother level of feedback. And then that's 720. And then the one is letting nature give you feedback. And that's like the synchronicities and the flirts and like seeing things unfolding for you in nature that are saying that you're in alignment and you're in integrity and that you're going in the right direction.
I love that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. That's really, really cool. I like that.
So I want to move on to our next rapid fire question, or a question that I think is an important one to ask. And that would be, when was the last time you significantly changed your mind about something? And I think this is an important question because, one, I don't think many of us allow, especially people with opinions, to change them and or evolve them. And we'll, bust the balls of many who seemingly change their mind over the course of time, which I think is, unfair. But I also think as a permission slip to somebody who is, highly intelligent and successful, if there was something that you've allowed yourself to significantly change about the way you think, I think we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of different things over my life for sure. I mean, the whole idea of thinking that, success was all about money, right? That's one thing, or that I had to be a certain way, or that once I left trading, I was never going back. I mean, there's been all these things. One of the things that comes to my mind right now is this belief that I never wanted to use the medical system, right? Like I was completely against the medical system. And then there have been periods of my life, things that happened in my life where I was kind of stubborn on that. But actually, like, there was this moment that I actually would have been smart, or I needed to use the medical system, something that I had completely written off as completely useless. So of course, I still realize that, like, that's just a tool in the toolbox. It's really good, like, in emergency situations, and it does nothing for prevention or recovery. But this whole idea that, like, I'm never going to see a doctor, I'm never going to have to use the hospital. I mean, that belief system showed up in my life in ways where, I had kids, even though I did everything to have a natural birth, we had to have C-sections. I mean, I've been married twice. I have 3 kids, super healthy women, doing everything we can. And all 3 times we wound up having emergency transfers from home births to the hospital to have C-sections. And I'm like, never in a million years would I have thought that was possible. But like, my belief system, you see, the problem is that when you have these rigidities, they show up in your life like that. So my like complete negation of the medical system, I think in some part attracts then the need to realize that, like, there is a place for it, right? And so I think, like, when we're talking about flow and we're talking about abundance and changing your mind, I think we might have mentioned this a little bit on the first podcast, but I think it's really interesting to talk about is like really being open to, like, changing your mind. Like we talked about earlier, being open to changing your mind about your partner, that the way that they were 10 minutes ago might not be the way they are now. And like developing this whole level of fluidity. Like when you're in relationships, we get stuck into these roles. So I'm the fun one, you're the disciplinarian. I'm the money maker, you're the homemaker. I'm the this and you're that. And like we get like set in these ways of like this is just the way we are. You're always the one who does this with the kids, and I'm always the one who does this, and I'm always like this way. And identifying these things and identifying them with your partner, and then being courageous enough to swap, to pick up a little bit of the other one. Is so healthy. And the interesting thing about it is that you don't even need to tell your partner you're doing it. Let's just say, for example, like this is something that kind of happened in my life, but I'm the fun one, let's say. And my wife is the one that's always disciplinating the kids. And I'm like looking at that, I'm like, wow, she's being like, that's tough. Like she has to do that all the time. She's riding the kids. So then without even saying anything to her, I then just go one time and like take on that role. And it's like a shamanic induction where then she switches into like being able to have more fun and have more play, right? So I think we got to constantly look at this idea that we're not roles. We're living on a continuum of roles, and being able to be fluid amongst roles, amongst personalities, perceptions, changing beliefs is such a big, important part to a healthy lifestyle and to flowing. That's what flow is, flowing between all of life. I remember my grandmother said to me once, I was talking to her about psychology, and she said, well, I'm a Freudian, I believe in Freud, and that's it. I'm like, well, you just stop there? Like, what do you mean? Like,
there's nothing else?
One of the things that like is literally like the biggest problem of getting old is this idea of getting rigid with your belief systems. It'll literally kill you. And that's some of the problems we have. The fact that like I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, that people are stuck in without even looking at a candidate. they're going to vote for a political party.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just ignorant. I mean, how about you just vote for whoever you think is the best candidate?
Yeah.
Like not based on a party line.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
I was reminded of something echoing that point. I was listening to a podcast, and I forget who I was listening to, but this person made the point that if you hear if you're talking to someone and you hear their stance on, just throwing something out there, just as an example, if you hear their stance on, say, abortion, that's kind of a topic right now that's getting a lot of attention. If you hear their stance on abortion, and then from just that, you understand, or you can guess or predict their stance on every other major political topic that there is, it's a good indication that that person is not actually critically thinking about what they believe about each of those individual topics, rather adopting a template from the conservatives or the liberals or whatever. It's a good reminder for us to not just wholeheartedly or full sail go in on, just because you agree with someone on something doesn't mean you have to accept everything else. And it applies to political parties as well. I liked that, because we certainly all know people where it's like, well, I know where you stand on that, so I know where you stand on everything.
Yeah.
And it's kind of sad.
Yeah. I also, going back to a conversation we were having, I think even before we pressed record, around BG3, and opening up this channel of vibration and frequency that's so elevated past what's currently available that we're actually groomed, and it's a no-brainer to choose this higher state of being. And even in the context of our conversation today, where we talked about AI, it scares the shit out of me. But it's also, I'm consistently wondering if there's a way to work with and collaborate with this technology that actually opens up the opportunity to exist and vibrate at an even higher frequency than we ever have been, because we're able to leverage this tool.
For sure. I mean, AI could create technology to clean water or make atomic bombs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about how we engage with it and what the intentions and the values of the creator and the user of it are.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the technology is mostly pure potential. It's just about how do we want to direct that. I mean, it can create or destroy.
Yeah.
It's kind of like fire right now. It's like it could create warmth and heat and light, or it could completely destroy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about balance.
Yeah.
And so maybe on that thread, another question that we've asked others and would love to get your thoughts on and opinion on. You could go in a host of different lanes and find yourself in a conversation around, these are end times. The apocalypse is near. Whether you go into farming and you see the state of topsoil, you go into kind of the globe and the environment. Many would say that something like global warming or climate change could be a killer. You could even talk to, like, we just got back from Egypt and had studied ancient civilizations and the reality that probably many of them were destroyed by some sort of cataclysmic event, and that we're due based on the timing of these things that we're due. And so as you kind of navigate a host of diverse territories in life, and through your travels and studies and conversations, how do you feel about the state of the world, and is there some sort of looming apocalyptic moment coming?
I obviously I don't know. I would say two things. I say one, I think it's more important than ever that we really do take care of this planet. I think we have to do everything we can, because we really are in grave danger. Our soils are screwed, our food supply is messed up, the medical system is terrible, education is not very good. I mean, if you look at there's a huge gap between the rich and the poor, all across the board. You could literally look at any sort of cross section of our culture, and there's certainly a stress on it. In terms of like apocalyptic times, what helped me actually was when I learned this sort of the yogic perspective of this, is that we live in these sort of cycles that they call yugas. So they hold a much larger worldview than is even, they call it achintya, which in Sanskrit translates to inconceivable. Like the universe is inconceivably vast. God or a source or, the ultimate intelligence is inconceivable. You can't even think about it. You can't wrap your mind about it because it's so large. And time in a lot of ways is like that. And that we look at like, okay, we're here on this like little planet in this little cross section of time, and some religions will tell you that the world is only like 5,000 years old and dinosaurs don't exist. And science will tell you that we've been, around for 10 billion years or whatever. The numbers keep growing. And what yoga teaches us is that we literally live in these cycles of time. So there are these golden ages and there's bronze ages and these iron ages. And then there's what we're in now, which is a 420,000 year cycle of the larger, like 4.6 million year cycle or something like that. That is called Kali Yuga, which is sort of like this end time cycle. And so there are all these ups and downs, all these cycles. I mean, imagine there's global warming, but if you go back, there's periods of huge global warming and there's periods of huge global cooling and ice ages where the whole world froze over, right? So when you look at it from that perspective, we are in this like larger concept of the end of the world. But what yoga teaches us is that's not that's not the first time that's happened, and that's not the last time that's going to happen. Is that we are in these like larger cycles of time that are inconceivably large. So I think again, it's sort of like the paradox of doing what you can to live to the fullest today, with also knowing that you're infinite. I think the same thing applies to the planet. Let's do what we can to make love together, to nurture our home and our mother that we're living upon, that we're literally walking on her back. Let's give her reverence so that we can have a place to live. And at the same time, hold a much larger worldview, which actually, when you do that, you begin to start taking care of the planet, into the future, because that there is more than one lifetime that you may be here, and you'll want a hospitable place to live that has, reasonable temperatures and reasonable food to eat.
Right.
And not living in a prison in a city or something like that. So, yeah.
I think that's beautiful perspective. I've definitely been guilty of finding myself down a rabbit hole
for sure.
of some sort of apocalyptic doom. And although I don't want to completely deny some of those ideas, I think there's a more important place to come back and sit with perspective. So that's well said.
I think it's definitely a balance for all of us. When we all have supercomputers in our pocket, we can access really unlimited information in a split second. I don't know if if the human mind, where it's at right now, or the holistic being that is the human, was ever meant to handle that much information at one time or in one day. And so I'm reminding myself all the time to pay attention to how much information I'm consuming and taking in, and how many miles is my thumb scrolling, even if it's under the guise of, well, I want to be informed. I want to know what's going on so that I can help others, or, dress it up in whatever pretty wrapping paper that you want. You still have to come back to, am I taking in more information than I can put in formation?
Very cool.
And it's oftentimes, I'm kind of appalled sometimes when I look at my phone. It gives you that like screen report, oh, it's been this many hours. And you're like, God, really? So it's I think important for us to remember that, and kind of piggybacking on what you were saying is like having this broader picture, this larger picture, and really harnessing our energy not on what's wrong with the world, because that's always going to be there. This yin and yang, this up and down, these cycles that we all go through and the earth goes through. There's not much we can do about that, but we can really pay attention to where we're putting our energy, and are we putting our energy towards creating the more beautiful world that we want to be a part of, or are we stuck in the mud, even though the mud is very real? Are we stuck in the mud, or are we looking to create a more beautiful place for all of us? And it's a good reminder for all of us.
Yeah, I think that's really well said. Angeles Arian, who's no longer alive, but one of my favorite teachers. She's just an amazing woman. She says you can learn a lot in the fast lane, but you can only integrate in the slow lane. Mm-hmm. Right? You have to move into the slow lane of life to really feel and integrate what's going on. And I think Paul told me that we have access to more information and more data in one 24-hour day now than we did in a 100 in a full lifetime 100 years ago. Right? Yeah. The pace of technology is doubling every 18 months, and it's probably only going to be increasing as this gets exponentially faster. Yeah. But our nervous systems are much slower to move, and so I think that's really, really true. And I do think about it a lot. There is this balance, which I don't know if I have the answer to, between like being informed. By the way, what are we being informed by? Because if we go on the internet, first of all, every single thing we see on the internet is curated for us. And it's curated to make us more rigid about our belief systems.
It's true.
It's not sending us like, hey, you might be interested in this totally opposite idea that you've never heard of. That's completely counter. It's like, oh, you have this stance? We're just going to feed that to you all day long because that's the kind of stuff you're going to click.
10% more extreme, 10% more extreme, 10% more extreme.
So it's like the more that we go on the internet and the more that we think we know, the less we actually know because we exclude more and more information. Yeah. So that's a whole nother thing. But let's just say we're getting informed information. We're watching good podcasts and unique interviews and stuff like that. Like, I think that's important, but then at the same time, like, I live on 100 acres in the woods, and when I go into nature, I have no idea that anything's happening in the world. Like, obviously that's a privilege, but I think, like, I feel totally disconnected as well. And so, I don't know, I think that there is a balance of being informed and also being present with the beauty and having reverence for the moment and for, like, what the opportunity we have right now just to live. Yeah. And, I think if we all really knew what we were on the cusp of, like the fact that like maybe we only have 1 week to live, like maybe that should inspire us to really live fully now. Mm-hmm. Don't wait till tomorrow to tell somebody how you really feel about them. Yeah. Don't wait till you're 60 to do the job you wanted to do. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right? Don't, it goes on and on, but like go over your edges, go over your stuck points, make a sound, start small, make a sound you never made, make a movement you've never made, try out a new position in bed that you've never tried on, try some new food. We're all eating like, I'm a steak and potatoes, like try an Indian restaurant, right? Go to Ethiopian food, try out a new exercise. There's thousands and thousands of plants and animals and exercises and experiences. Like get out there and really live because maybe it's helpful. Maybe we need to have this perspective that we don't know what's going to happen, which is a real thing, and that should really, if we really understood that, like we don't know that if we have a tomorrow, then we would really live today.
Yeah, that's a beautiful reminder. Rituals and routines are very productive, but they turn into compulsions when novelty is not introduced and when diversities and seasonality is not introduced. And that's such a great reminder because it can be as simple as that. It can be as simple as like having coffee at a different section of the beach than we would have usually. And it seems like we're on a first date. It's little intentional conscious moves in your life like that spark an entire bouquet of emotions and chemicals in your body that lead to another decision that is more abundant.
Try a new route to work, let your intuition guide you and be open to what happens and explores. Like that's what life's all about, is like novelty and creation and ingenuity and all of these kinds of things. So
that's the moment where you feel like, or moments where you feel like you're squeezing all the juice and the nectar and the pleasure out of life because you're present for it, rather than life just happening to you and like, wait, what was that all about? Like, what was that for? It's I feel like I've said this 100 times, but it is true. It's like all of these are just really good reminders for all of us, because certainly we've heard some of these concepts before, but we just like reminding myself it's okay to breathe. You're going to move through this when there's a negative situation, or like I haven't grasped something to the degree that I am unconsciously competent. It's just a good reminder for us all to really, like, in every moment, what is the juice that's wanting to be squeezed out of this moment of life.
And I'm so glad you walked us through this framework, because everything that I can tell from this is how you consciously start setting yourself up to experience more moments like this.
Yeah.
And it can lead to what we're calling flow and abundance in a host of different aspects of your life. So we get a lot of people coming on here and we're constantly talking about amazing products. This is a course I will 100% take, and I'm like thirsty for it, and I'm just so excited that you're gifting this elixir of life.
Thank you. Yeah, it's really, I mean, up until this point, it's like my life's work. I traveled. I spent my life asking these questions. I sat on Wall Street for 20 years working with the best people. I went all around the world. I've studied with Paul privately for like 13 years. I've studied with masters in all areas. And for me, it's like I spent thousands and thousands of hours and thousands of dollars like searching through all these things. And I wanted to actually answer those same questions that I had when I was 5 years old and 7 years old, and the same issues that I had at 25. I was like really kind of doing this for my old self, right? I want to give to you, to the potential, to the listeners or the potential clients, like all of what I've integrated from all of these different people in one like digestible little course. And so that's essentially why I created it.
Hell yeah, man.
Yeah. It's so cool because you have a very unique set of life experiences, both what circumstantially you were in with job and everything like that, but also like where you chose to like, no, I'm going to go deep. I'm going to hire the world expert in this thing, whatever it is. I'm going to go deep in this, extract all the juice, and then now this is your chance to take it back in full circle, hero's journey, which is what you mentioned.
Yeah,
bringing the elixir of life back into the world, which is so cool. And go ahead.
I was just if you were done, I was just going to say maybe some logistics on the course, like start date.
Yeah,
how can people find out about it?
It's really easy right now. You can go to jasonpickard.org, and that'll take you to or on my Instagram, but jasonpickard.org or my Instagram, Jason Pickard Official. And right now you can get my freebie offering, which is like I wanted to give a free gift to the world, which I put a lot of my heart and soul into it.
It's legit.
Yeah, I shared it with you guys.
It shouldn't be free, but it is.
Well, that's what my dad was telling me. He's like, because he's all business minded. He's like, this is too good. Like you should be charging for this. And I said, well, I wanted to just give something out there that was like my giveaway, because I know that this is what most people will probably read. There'll probably be more people that I can touch through this than might even take my course, right? Because this is like a way to kind of learn more about me. So I put everything into it. Not only was it produced well, and my course, by the way, was produced by Freedom Builders, which I know you guys know. They're incredible, incredible team working with them. It was really a flirt that brought them into my life, and I just kind of, instead of interviewing like 10 different companies to help me produce a course, I just went with my gut instinct and my intuition, and it was spot on. It was just like, it's been so fun working with them, and we created a beautiful freaking course, and they helped me, really put the style to the PDF, this resource that I created. But I essentially took the 8 steps to mastery and brought down like, what are one thing from each step that would not take anyone any money or any more of their time to do if they just swapped this for that, right? And so all of the 8 keys are on there, and they're literally things that you can do right now at home without any resources, without any money, and they will instantly change your life and will help you generate more wealth and well-being. And it's my gift to you. And so please check it out. Go to jasonpickard.org or go to Jason Pickard Official on Instagram, and get the content, the amazing resource, 8 Keys to Greater Wealth and Wellbeing. And then all of the information about the course will be on my Instagram. It's going to be coming out probably around May, and there'll be a lot of information over the next couple months where I'm just going to be dumping tons of resources and content out there on Instagram so that people can follow along.
And of course, we will have all those relevant links in the description box on YouTube and the show notes on Apple and Spotify and everything. So if you missed any of that, just go there. Obviously, it'll be there. Last question from me.
Yeah.
Medicin podcast is all about leaning into the medicines that help us cultivate conscious relationships with ourselves, with the divine, with our partner, with food, with movement, all of it. What for you feels like medicine right now?
Oh gosh, there's so many things, but I was just thinking about something funny. You know, I just filmed this little Instagram that I didn't put out there yet, where it's like real trader reacts to Wolf of Wall Street.
Oh,
you know?
gosh, yes.
Do you know the Wolf of Wall Street?
Oh, yeah.
So there's this amazing scene when McConaughey and Leonardo DiCaprio are at they're having lunch, and he's doing this.
Yeah.
And I'm going through and I break down like, okay, what is he actually doing here when he's tapping his chest?
Yeah.
Well, he's doing the thymus thump. Like I don't know if he consciously knows, but there's actually a routine that I did when I was on Wall Street where you thump your thymus gland and it actually gives you energy and harmonizes you and brings up your mental clarity and your immune system and all that. And at the same time, he's humming, and humming stimulates the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic, right?
Yeah.
And so I go through all this thing, and then he says, well, one of the keys you need is cocaine. And so I break it down how I said, well, I think there's actually a better drug, and it's DMT, and it's actually inside of our own bodies, and all you have to do is breathe. Wow. So I think, getting high off all of these things that are endogenous to ourselves, right? The flow state itself is this incredible medicine. In fact, these studies from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi show that life satisfaction doesn't come from after you have a certain amount of money, after your survival needs are met, more money doesn't equate at all or correlate at all to life satisfaction. Life satisfaction comes from being in the flow, doing what you love to do, and having health around it. So for me, this flow state, these 8 steps, this sharing of abundance, that's the medicine, and it all comes from inside of us.
Yeah.
It's all our birthright.
Yeah.
Our ancestors have been doing it for tens of thousands of years, maybe trillions if you believe in the Yuga cycles. And it's we have to get back to the future.
Yeah.
To get back to it. That's who we really are. We are this medicine. We are this flow, and I guess that's what I'm getting high on right now.
Yeah,
Beautiful,
I love it.
Absolutely beautiful. I mean, this has been such a robust and abundant conversation. Just so much gratitude for you.
Yeah, man.
We've known you for a little over a year, but man, I just feel like I've known you for a long time, and I know there's so much more to come. So thank you for gifting us your time and your wisdom. And I know this is just the beginning. I just am so blessed to be in your life.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. It's been an honor.
Gratitude is a hard thing to, we know the benefits of gratitude. Mm-hmm. Science will tell us that gratitude was good for optimism, and gratitude is good for relationships.
Yeah.
But we all what is gratitude? But it's a felt sense, this feeling that you feel here that you can't talk about it. When you breathe together and share something that you love to do, and you get into the flow with each other, that byproduct of that is gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're feeling.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Our words are only a snippet of what it actually feels like. Yeah.
As Chris Dufay would say, we're using sounds in our mouth to try to put words to an experience that we'll never be able to. It's like trying to take a picture of a sunset. Can't do it.
Yep.
It's never as good.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. All right, guys, go check out all of Jason's goodies, Instagram, his website. Check the description box and show notes for the links. We'll talk to you next time. Go spread some light. Okay, bye.
Thank you so much for listening.
If you enjoyed that, check out right over here for some more fun clips.
Oh, and you're going to want to subscribe.
Bye.